Good morning and welcome to the October meeting of the Podiatric Medical Board of California. I'd like to call this meeting to order and make sure we have a quorum. Kathleen, could you assist us with that?
Thank you. Good morning. I will now take attendance. Dr. McAloon,
Present.
Dr. Lee,
Present.
Dr. Patel,
Present.
Dr. Glazer,
Present.
Miss Elliott,
Present.
and Miss Chang. I believe she's not here. Absent. We do have a quorum.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome any public members that are with us, either here or virtually, to our meeting this morning. And I would also like to acknowledge my gratitude for the privilege to serve as president of this board. Today will be my last meeting as president. And so I want to acknowledge that privilege that I've had to serve in this capacity. I'd like to next ask for any public comments on items not on our agenda. Any here with us? Are we connected virtually for public members as well today?
They're just able to view, they're not able to
Right,
participate.
right.
There's no WebEx.
Thank you. So only public here will be available to participate in our meeting.
Unless they send in via text or email or something, you guys have that set up.
Okay, great. Thank you. Seeing no public comments on items not on our agenda, I'd like to move to reviewing the minutes from our last board meeting, which was on June 7th. They are in our published materials for today. I know that the board members have previously reviewed those before coming to the meeting today. And may I request a motion to accept those minutes unless anyone has any adjustments to them?
Motion to accept.
And who's the second?
Any
Dr.
second on the motion to
I
accept?
second.
Thank you. Dr. Patel, second.
Dr. Patel.
Do you need to request a vote on that?
Okay, I will take the vote.
Thank you.
Dr. McAloon.
Before you get started
Oh,
on that,
thank
we
you.
do public comment.
Oh, thank you. Any public comment on our minutes from our last meeting? Great, thank you for the reminder. Thank you.
Dr. McAloon,
Approve.
Dr. Lee,
Approve.
Dr. Patel,
Approved.
Dr. Glazer,
Approve.
Miss Elliott.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Great, thank you very much. Next, we'll receive the updated reports from our different areas of our program, starting with the licensing program. Dr. Patel?
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to call on Andrea to report out our licensing program.
Good morning.
Good morning, thank you.
So the following information is for the fourth quarter of fiscal year 23-24 between April 1st and June 30th. There were 30 newly licensed DPMs. For the fiscal year, we had 19 pending applications with 3 candidates that recently completed their packages. And for the fiscal year, we had 27 applicants come from out of state, 35 are third-year residents from California, and 36 were third-year residents from an out-of-state program. Moving on to renewals, there was 268 renewals mailed with 246 licenses renewed by the fourth quarter. For the residents, we had no new residents added, so the total is still at 131, and we have the 3-month timeline. Do we have any questions on any of that information? That concludes.
Thank you. Dr. Patel, did you have any comments of any findings on the licensing program report? Anything of note to the board that we
No,
should be
nothing to
aware of?
note.
Nothing out of, Thank you very much. Shall I take all the reports and then ask the public comment, or to stop at each one?
Let's go for each one. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Is there any public comment on the licensing program report received today? Great. Seeing none, we'll move to the enforcement program report. Mr. Trujillo-Elliott?
Good morning, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and ask Bethany to go ahead and report on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Today's enforcement report covers the fourth quarter of 23-24, April 1st through June 30th, and also has data from the full fiscal year of 23-24. Starting with our statistics, complaint data, fourth quarter data is provided over the prior fourth quarter data. We received 37 complaints this last fourth quarter, which is a 16% decrease over the prior year. Average days to close or assign a case was 13 days, slightly over what is requested by DCA. We had a couple complaints that came in and were returned to us accidentally from medical board, and so it caused an additional delay, and so that threw off our data a little bit, but we should be back on track. Investigation data shows 34 desk investigations assigned and 35 desk investigations completed. Processing time averaged 51 days, a 55% increase over 33 days the previous fourth quarter. Since June 2024, we do not have a assigned consumer complaint analyst at the medical board. Positions can't be filled right now, so staff is trying to get all the work done and have shortages at this time. So hopefully, we've had a meeting with them recently trying to keep our information on track, but hopefully in the next few months we won't see too much of a delay in these desk investigations being processed. 2 field investigations were assigned in the fourth quarter, and 2 cases were completed. These cases took an average of 491 days to complete. Again, we're seeing an increase over the prior fourth quarter of about 46%, but over the total year, we're not going to see that big of a difference. Case investigation times, which include desk and field investigations, show an average days to complete at 60 days, which is actually showing a decrease over the prior year. And case investigation aging data shows that of the 32 investigations closed, 84% or 27 were closed within 90 days, 13% or 4 were closed between 91 days and 1 year, and less than 1% or only 1 investigation took longer than 1 year to close. Moving on to the disciplinary data, there were no cases initiated during the fourth quarter. Prior year, we had 6 cases initiated. Again, we can see with a very small board, it might seem like our statistics are really skewed, but over the course of a year, they seem to balance out. And no final orders went into effect, compared to 3 in the prior year's fourth quarter. 3 citations were issued during the fourth quarter. And there were 8 active licensees on probation at the end of quarter 4. Moving on to attachment D, we have the statistics for the full fiscal year. So we have a complaint intake increase of 8%, a total of 144 complaints received in the year compared to 133 the year before. We had an investigation increase as 8% as well, with 141 investigations assigned compared to 130 the prior fiscal year. And the average days to complete investigations was 126 days, which is a decrease from the prior year, which averaged 175 days. So that's looking pretty good. We had, 4 disciplinary cases initiated at the AG's office, a decrease of 71% from the 14 cases initiated the prior year. So our cases initiated have really reduced this current year, but I don't think we're going to be seeing a trend of that. But it did probably help our expenses a little bit this year, which is good. We need that. Disciplinary cases took an average of 1,014 days to complete, compared to 1,238 days for the prior fiscal year, which is an 18% decrease. We had 5 final orders issued for the year compared to 7 the prior year, and no accusations withdrawn, dismissed, or declined. 3 citations were issued for the year, and the codes violated are there in the attachment D. Moving forward to Attorney General case aging data. This is information that we received from September 5th of this year. We have 14, possibly more, active cases pending with the AG. Not all of them have been accepted at this time for prosecution. That's the statistics. So is there any questions before I keep moving forward on the enforcement stats? Okay, doesn't look at this time. Next we have attachment F, which is the complaints and formal disciplinary actions. This is a report that I provide once a year. that shows our total number of complaints compared to the previous years. I'm giving 10 years of data at this time. And one thing that this shows, I know that the board has asked in the past about what percentage of our cases end up in disciplinary action. And looking over this data, we have a total of 1,466 complaints received over 10 years and 68 disciplinary actions over the same period. That should say 10 years. And the calculation brings us to about 4.6% of our complaints leading to disciplinary actions, which is actually really close to what medical board also calculates out to. Any questions on that report?
Is there any data on the number of complaints per the number of licensees?
I don't have that at this time, but I'm sure that's something that we could include. I mean, I could work with Andrea and get the total number of licensees renewed for the year and then make that comparison if it's something the board would like.
Well, I think this is very helpful on attachment F, having that 10-year of how many complaints received in disciplinary action, so we can see if there's consistency or big swings or changes. And so just looking at those numbers, there does not appear to be big swings over the year. But to Dr. Patel's point, if there's been a significant change in the licensee number, then that might be some more data that would help interpret those numbers. So if that's possible to also add the number of licensees, I don't know if you can do it over each year, the way that this graph was on the bottom of the page.
I believe we could get the number of licensees renewed each year and place that in another line.
Like, could you have like the total number of licensees that year? So, like, you have 2,000 licensees in this year, 1,999 for each year, so that we could tell. For example, the amount of complaints, for example, now is lower at 144 compared to the first one at 150. But my other next question, well, and how many licensees
Right.
for those 2 different years? Because if the numbers are consistent, but we have half as many licensees,
Yes.
then that really wouldn't be a consistent percentage per se, even though the raw numbers would be the same.
Dre, is it possible to get a report of how many licensees we have active as of like June 30th of each fiscal year?
I can reach out to IT to ask for that information.
Because then I think that would be helpful to see if our percentages are staying the same as well as our raw numbers. I think it would be helpful for analyzing that data quickly.
Okay. Are
Yeah.
you just wanting the people that are current 20, status 20, current
Yeah.
delinquents or?
Exactly. We just want to know, and standard across that, how many active licensees do we have for each of those years, so we can tell the percentage of complaints received of how many
What percentage of
licensees we have.
licensees are we
The percentage of
disciplining? Yeah.
licensees we have. Yeah, so just the total active licensees that year.
We'll work on getting that together.
Thank you. I think that would help us interpret that data even better than, this is very helpful, and I think that would be added additional help to that, if that's possible for this report.
We will work on it.
Is that what you were thinking about, Dr. Patel, in that?
Yeah,
regard?
exactly. And I think it would be nice also to be able to compare that to the medical board to see, are our complaints in line with that, or are we seeing a higher number of complaints or less? So,
Thank you very much. That would be helpful for us to continue to evaluate our mission.
Okay, no problem. If there's not further questions on that item, I will move to attachment G, which is the data of licensees disciplined since fiscal year 13-14. This just breaks down some of the information as far as the school they attended, their residency information, the type of discipline, their age, gender, and years in practice at time of discipline. There was a question requested by the board before, whether they were in solo practice, a corporation, group, or hospital practice. That information isn't easily obtained because it's not required to be provided by the licensees. So I'm just making my best guess based on information I Google search there. And is there any questions on or discussion for the disciplinary data?
Just on rough math, looking from 2020 forward on licensees, that's in the booklet. It looks like less than 1% of our licensees end up with something that we carry forward.
Thank you. I think the other reason that attachment G is helpful, so as a board, we can look at patterns of who might be most in need of support, educational opportunities and outreach. For example, is it older practitioners or younger practitioners? To the other question that is harder to find out, is it private practice, more or less than medical group doctors? And so, which are there certain colleges that some people have more percentage than others? And I think having that data then helps us as a board find out how can we best help our licensees be compliant with the rules and regulations of practice of podiatric medicine in our outreach. And so that's why I think that data is helpful. Is it possible? I know every time you give us something, you want like, oh, and can we do this? To see pie charts, for example, maybe by gender or by age groups, years, 30 to 40, 40, 50, 50 to 60, is it possible to see some of that data in pie charts just to see, I don't know if that is or not.
I've had a coworker just offer help. So I think we could probably put something like that together. It's been a while since I've done that, so.
Because that would help. Yes, the details are in this chart, which is very helpful, but sometimes just perhaps pie charts with color coded, we could really see real quick what the issues might be to help us with any programs or outreach for if there's a particular group of people that we say, oh, we should make sure that this group of people knows X, Y, and Z or something. Pie charts might help us deal with that data more quickly, but this is a great deeper dive for us.
I've made a note, and fortunately, these couple of reports are only provided once a year, so
Yes.
it should make it a lot easier.
Great, great.
Finally, we have the performance measures, and posted is online through DCA is through fiscal year 23-24. Quarter 4 data should possibly be up or up there really soon. Also, historical data can be found prior to fiscal year 16-17 and another website provided. That ends the statistical portion of my report. Any questions before I move on? Okay. Under the probation program update, I have some information on cost recovery. For the fourth quarter, we received $43,032.95 in cost recovery payments, $19,218.22 in probation monitoring payments, for a total of $62,251.17 in cost recovery for quarter 4. And then for the entire fiscal year, I have a total of $220,530.42 in cost recovery. And the final portion of my report, we do have a consultant application. Dr. Anna Sorkin has provided an application, and her CV is attached. The enforcement committee did review her information in more detail. We completed 3 reference checks that all came back good. So at this point, I guess it would be for the board to determine if they want to accept this individual as a consultant and take a vote.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Hugh Elliott, does your committee submit this candidate to be accepted as a consultant for the
Yes.
board?
Yes, it
Could,
does.
could you make a motion, please?
I will make the motion. And do we want to do public comment first
Oh.
or after?
Yes. Do we make the motion and then ask for public comment? Yes, okay, great, perfect. Thank you for the reminder. So please make the motion.
I thought I made the motion. Made the motion.
I need a second.
Oh, so do you have a second on the motion?
So seconded.
Great, Dr. Glazer. So we have a motion to accept the application for Dr. Anna Sorkin to be a consultant for the Podiatric Medical Board of California. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, can we take a vote to accept this application?
Okay. Dr. McAloon,
Accept.
Dr. Lee,
Accept.
Dr. Patel,
Accept.
Dr. Glazer,
Accept.
Ms. Elliott.
Accept.
Unanimous, it passes.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
And that concludes my enforcement report, unless there are any other items to discuss that are not included in that report.
Mr. Hugh Elliott, do you have any other comments on the report for the board from the enforcement program?
The only comment I think is just for us to kind of keep an eye on kind of the time frame it's taking to go to the state attorney's office and kind of that process. But other than that, the numbers are still kind of where they're at, and we're kind of at the mercy of the state at this point. So, but just to remind the board to keep an eye on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the Legislative and Regulation Program, Dr. Lee.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Ms. Kathleen Cooper to help us present this program's findings.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. You know, at this time of year, the legislative report, as usual, is whittled down to very little compared to what is introduced at the beginning of the year. So we are left with SB 1451, which has to do with the professions and vocation titles that people are using. And this adds a misdemeanor element to the misuse of the title. So as this affects us, or DPMs, because your license is a physician and surgeon license, you are able to use the word doctor. That wasn't always in there. It came at the very end that we are in there to use the word doctor. That almost was taken away. But if you look at the history of 1451, chiropractors, nurse practitioners, and many others are attempting, you know, if the name tag comes from Kaiser and it doesn't distinguish that you are a podiatric physician, I strongly urge people, if it's coming from above a corporate thing, to make sure that you are not holding yourself out to the public to be a physician. And so that P&S magic word, they do not want it extended except for MDs and DOs. You can call yourself a doctor, and you can call yourself a podiatrist, a doctor of podiatric medicine, but you have to be careful about the P&S, because that's where I think they're going, and they may continue doing this. It seems like they're whittling it away so that the magic words physician and surgeons are just maintained for MDs and DOs. We are probably the most gray area there, and it's very difficult to monitor this when all of the country's schools, magazines, publications, associations are using the word podiatric physician. That is not, I don't believe, a violation, but then we won't know until it's tested. So I don't think anyone's going to come to your door because you have the word podiatric physician and try to enforce it on you. However, I think we all have to start being aware that when you do new signage or you have a name tag and you're holding yourself out to the public, please feel free to read 1451. The section that applies to us is, in this bill, it's at 2054. So that's the title for the Business and Professions Code. This attachment doesn't have page numbers, but probably halfway in, you've got one, two, maybe like page, I don't know what it is, 5 or 6. It's section 7, and then below that is 2054. So you'll see down as the new legislation goes down to 4, any person holding a current active license that's not trying to call themselves a physician and surgeon, as long as it's in compliance with your actual education and your title is consistent, you're fine. But if you do hold yourself out to be a full physician and surgeon, I think there could be ramifications. That's why this legislation, I believe, passed readily. It was not a problem for this to go through. We've all known this is an issue for many years, at least the last 10 years. Anyways, it affected us in the end. It didn't really affect us. But I think it's important everybody knows. We'll be putting it on the website, sending it in a listserv. And if anyone has any questions, please let me know. But that is the only successful legislation that impacted podiatrists this year. I mean, not the only one, but the only one that, as far as us as a licensing board, need to let you know about.
And I'd like to open it up and see if Mr. Spencer would like to comment on that, because he was, CPMA was a sponsor of this bill. Ryan, do you have any comments?
We have a public comment on SB 1451.
Actually, on what was just said, just to clarify.
Thank you.
Sure. Sure. Ryan Spencer, I'm the legislative advocate for the California Podiatric Medical Association. We were not the sponsors of SB 1451, but we did monitor very closely given the impacts that it could potentially have had on podiatrists. There was provision that was placed in the bill over the summer to clarify who could still call themselves doctors. And the way that the language was originally written, basically implied that if you are a MD or a DO and you are licensed pursuant to this chapter, which is located in Chapter 5, you can call yourself a doctor. If you are a healing arts professional licensed in another chapter, you can call yourself a doctor. That posed a significant problem for DPMs because DPMs, as you know, are the only healthcare practitioner who is licensed to this level that calls themselves doctors within Chapter 5, the same that chapter that MDs and DOs are located. So CPMA pushed very hard up until the last week of session to insert a clarifying amendment. We called it clarifying, but without that amendment, theoretically, not just theoretically, but legally, you could not call yourself even doctors unless they made that change. As I was sharing with Brian, there was a lot of end-of-session maneuvering, which tends to happen in the session, and things were getting put aside, but we made sure it stayed up front. Eventually, the amendments were adopted so that what was just presented would indeed be the case. So SB 1451 does not directly impact what you currently are allowed to do. However, it does reaffirm the fact that only MDs, DOs can call themselves physicians.
What about a situation where our hospital, our badge that our hospital gives to us says physician on it?
I think what they said, if that is challenged, it would be tested by the courts because you aren't holding yourself out to be an MD or a DO, but they do use the words physicians in the statute, so it could be challenged.
For example, our hospital badge could say our name and our degree and have that, as you know, there was a law passed about certain font identifying your role in the hospital, whether you're an administrator or a nurse or a physician. And so our badges might have our name and our degree and have the tag physician attached to them, given to us by our hospital because that's how they designate us.
I would ask your legal counsel.
And I would just say, for the record, because this will be public on YouTube, you should ask your employer to put podiatric physician for your own safety. It's a misdemeanor. But I don't know if you can get, at that level, but at least if you made an effort, it won't be your fault if you show that you did make that effort to clarify.
If I may through the chair, I think even the words physician would be something that I would want to run by legal as well, even if it says podiatric before it, just to be safe. To her point, it is a misdemeanor now.
Could I ask a clarifying question? If a podiatrist goes to the patient and says, I'm Dr. Patel and I'm your surgeon today, would that be considered a misdemeanor?
I don't believe so, because you
Yeah.
are a surgeon, and that's within your scope of practice. So that would be something that I do believe should be clarified in future. There was a bill 2 years ago which actually clarified you could call yourselves a surgeon. That bill was hung up, and this was what was replaced with it. I don't think anybody disputes that you are not surgeons. You are. I mean, you can amputate the foot below the cobra joint, so you are a surgeon. So I think in terms of title, the way the law reads, I wouldn't be too concerned about calling yourself a surgeon. But again, I have an MBA, I don't have a JD, so I would recommend you talk to your legal counsel first.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Okay.
Brian.
Any other public comment about SB 1451? Any additional discussion amongst the board?
Would these complaints come through the board if these did occur?
I don't know how it would actually play out. If someone would have to make a complaint to us that that's what's happening, or to another agency, I don't know who it would be. But in order to be safe, if you make an effort to follow this, I mean, Doctor of Podiatric Medicine, I think, is a great, accurate title. You still get to say doctor. You are a surgeon. It's the word physician and the magic term PNS, physician and surgeon, that everybody's trying so hard to get. And I mean even psychologists. You know what I mean? They want that designation probably for reimbursement reasons at a higher rate with the benefits companies. But whatever it is, if you're holding yourself out to the public, and maybe not next year, but at a certain point when stationery and name tags could be changed, signage outside your office, things like that, you should clarify. This is kind of just a warning. We don't know how it would be enforced and played out, but it's pretty clear.
Yeah, my question is because it says physician and surgeon, comma, physician, comma, surgeon. So it actually spells out surgeon separately than physician and surgeon. So I'm curious why they did that. To me, that's particular because they want to spell out the word surgeon So I would read that as even saying surgeon would be a misdemeanor.
You are a surgeon. This is maybe where clarification will be needed as we, sometimes legislation is passed, but until it's in the, people are using it, that we find out something might have to be changed. You are a surgeon, like Ryan said. So I don't see how that can be actionable, but I think the thing is, you have to be careful with the physician word and physician and surgeon. It's ubiquitous. All over the country, people are using the word podiatric physician. However, now in California, we're saying, use doctor of podiatric medicine to be 100% safe. We believe surgeon is definitely a correct definition, but you might want to add podiatric. As long as the public is not getting the feeling that you're an MD or DO, I don't really believe you're violating the statute.
So I'm going to interrupt for just 1 second. This has already passed, correct?
Yes.
I would like the legislative committee to have a conversation about what recommendations the board, so I think it's up to the board to declare what our interpretation of this means and what we're recommending to our constituents. And so I'd like this committee to start having that conversation about what this means to our licensees, what do we want what might we want to post on the website, or how we might want to advise our licensees. So I'd like to ask the legislative committee to have that, and then report back at our next meeting to the board as a whole about the thoughts that the committee has about how we should articulate the board's position on what this means. Would that be agreeable?
Yes, certainly. We'll add this as an item for our agenda for our next meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
Thank you.
Dr.
And
McAloon.
certainly, I did not mean to cut off any other comments on this, but I wanted to say that I was thinking.
Great minds think alike. I was going to ask the same question.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. We always have a regulation part. However, we will be bringing to the next board meeting, hopefully disciplinary guidelines and maybe a section 100 that has to do with changing the regulations. But we can't discuss it here. It's not agendized. It's not on the public's notice. But we will be seeing those at the next board meeting. And that concludes the ledge report.
Okay, I
Thank you
just
very
had one quick, so it was passed, it just hasn't been signed by the governor, correct?
No, I think it was enrolled on 9/6.
Ah, okay, thank you.
It has been signed by the governor. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you. Is there any other board member discussion of the legislative and regulation program? Any public comment on our legislative and regulation program? Seeing none, I'd like to move to the report on public education. Ms. Trujillo Elliott?
Thank you very much. I am going to go ahead and ask Kathleen Cooper to step up, since she worked so hard on footnotes, to go ahead and give this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Elliott. I'd like to thank everybody who contributed, Dr. McAloon, Dr. Lee, our enforcement and licensing departments added, and we have this year's newsletter, which does updates on some legislation that passed last year. We have some articles submitted by beginners in the field. Thank you, Dr. Lee. And this will be posted on the website. It's it is going up right now. But if anybody would like a hard copy, there are some extra hard copies by the front door there. Any comments on the newsletter? Okay. I'll move on to the second aspect of the report, which is our social media, the PMBC website. Licensing and our admin people have been doing a great job as far as our listserv. I think we started at 100 people, 120, something like that. We're up over 500 now. So it is a very valuable way to reach our members if they open their email. And is that correct? It is up over 500. Yeah. So our listserv is growing. And we also use Twitter and Facebook to get out messages. We also use the website. So if anybody has any comments almost all of our renewals now are done electronically. We rarely see a check at the front office, so that's expediting for everybody's license when they're getting close to the date. I think it makes people very happy. There might be something that people might notice at a time in the future where a little bit of the credit card will be brought to the licensee on their fee, to use the credit card rather than write a check. But other than that, we have got no negative feedback. I'm always asking for updates. If you see something you'd like changed on the website, just let me know. And that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any further comments on the public education report from the board?
I just want to say thank you to Kathleen Cooper and to the board members who stepped up to provide some information. It looks better and better every time, so thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much. Is there any public comment on our public education report? Seeing none, do I need to do anything more than accept the reports on behalf of the board? That's very good. So then it's time to move to the executive management reports, with the first item being the discussion and action item about the sunset report for 2025. I'd like to ask our executive officer, Brian Naslin, to
I get the big one, huh?
get exactly right. You get the big one.
I get the big old humper. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at this monster document? I know, it probably took you until like 4 o'clock in the morning, right? Everything looks good. There's a little bit of modifications that are gonna happen, and I think there might be some motions. I don't think we're at a final stage yet, but the motions that might come will give authority to me and my staff to make those technical changes and add some information, and then it will be final. So first and foremost, does anybody have any questions? Does anything stick out to you? I know there's a lot of information here.
Would I ask for any public comment about our sunset draft report at this point?
You can?
Good. Are there any public questions or comments for us regarding the draft of our sunset report at this time? Well, I would say, is it appropriate to discuss everything that needs to go, that our sunset report might include, including the fees for this board?
Yes.
Yeah, so that would be appropriate to discuss at this time. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. And before I speak on this issue, would you mind if I just made one point on the last SB 1451, a comment that she made at the very end, which is a very important point that would, I think, help answer your question. The whole purpose of SB 1451 was to prevent misleading people and thinking you're an MD or a DO. So if you are a surgeon, you have DPM on your name, but you're a surgeon. You can call yourself a surgeon as long as they don't think you are an MD or a DO. There are a lot of professionals who have much lower licenses than you have that there's concern that they are putting themselves out as more than they actually are, if that makes sense. So, but still talk to your attorney. Thank you. Thanks again for the time and your indulgence on this. This is about the fee, and Brian and I had extensive dialogue, as you well know, over the course of the year, and just recently. I think CPMA completely understands the fiscal situation facing the board and recognizes the proposal to increase the fees is your intent to help stabilize the board. Understand that. I think the issue is increase of the fee to this magnitude is just a very difficult proposal, and I hope you understand that. A difficult proposal for the CPMA and other podiatrists who we've spoken to just to accept. It is like a 38% increase. It's a $500 increase, and it'd be one of the largest increases that I've seen in a while. And I represent a few healing arts professionals. We're currently soliciting input from other members, and what I've heard so far hasn't been that positive, obviously. And so we're hoping to get that feedback and submit that to you of some of the concerns that people have by increasing such a fee. So I do hope that the board and the staff, and I assume we will continue to work on this as it moves through the process to help mitigate some of the impacts that this fee increase may have on licensees. We all know this profession. It's although I heard the report, and I'm heartened to hear new licensees being signed, but we definitely need more. More licensees are retiring, and I feel they're coming. There's empty seats in the podiatric medical schools that CPMA is working hard and this board is working hard trying to find a way to increase the level of DPMs that are out there to meet the growing need of patients. Providers may be going down, but the need for patient care keeps going up. I want to kind of work with Brian a little bit more to see kind of what other statutory requirements are out there imposed on the board, what are the things that we can do to help mitigate some of the costs that are out there. There may not be some, but there may be some. And I think there's a long time between now and middle of September 2025, which I know this is going to go into a piece of legislation in the Sunset Report that's as required. So there is time for us to continue to have this discussion. So whatever fee you do vote on today, I do hope that we'll continue our dialogue and you'll hear some of the concerns, and we'll even share with you some people, if they don't have concerns, we'll share that with you as well. But I want to still keep that open door so you're able to hear our feedback. And when it comes down to it, if there are modifications, maybe we could roll back the fee. We hope you'll consider it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your following, representing the licensees and making sure the board hears all stakeholders in moving forward. This board's mission is to protect the public, the citizens of California, and that's our primary goal and our mission. That's our primary responsibility. And it is the position of this board that we think it's in the best interest of the citizens of California for the Podiatric Medical Board to be its own separate entity and to continue to exist is also the position of the board. One of our other priorities, of course, amongst our other priorities, is fiscal responsibility. And I think that you commented on as well that our executive officer is committed to being as fiscally prudent and responsible with our funds as we are, driven by the licensing fees is our primary income, that this board is run as lean as possible to mitigate any unnecessary expenses. And I know he will continue to do that on the behalf of the board. It is true that many of our expenses are not directly under our control, such as the rising cost of salaries and staff and inflation, and particularly recently, last few years, the rise in expenses from the AG's office have significantly impacted this board. Given to your comment, the significant increase in this fee increase compared to previous years is primarily due to the expenses that come from the AG's office, which we don't have any control over as we fulfill our mission to investigate complaints and protect the citizens of California. So those are some of the limitations. The other issue for this board is these are challenging things to study and to project, and certainly having some length of time for this to last. For example, not having to come back year after year after year to do a fee increase, but hopefully set us up for 3 years, 5 years, so that we don't have to spend a lot of our time doing this year by year by year and trying to predict the ups and downs. And so we'd also like to have a fee increase that will last for some while. We don't have to come back to licensees in 1 year or 2 years and again do another fee increase. So that's also taking into consideration as well with the number that'll get us through our projections for ideally 5 years. And some of us will be here and some of us won't, but it's our responsibility to make sure, whether we're on the board or not, that we have taken care of making sure the board continues to exist and fulfill its mission. Would any other board members like to make comments about the fee increase that we will be including today in our sunset review? Any other comments? Would now be the appropriate time to talk about what the wording will be for the fee increase to put into our sunset review and then for the board to vote on that?
Right, so it'd be a motion on the fee increase,
Okay.
and that would be section 10.
I motion that Section 10 of the Sunset Board requests that the legislature implement a fee increase of $1,850 and authorize staff to perform any task necessary to incorporate the fee increase in Section 10, including but not limited to adding any information necessary to explain the need for that fee increase. Is there a second on that motion?
Is there a discussion first?
Oh, for discussion first, my apologies. Discussion before a second?
I'll second it for now, and then we can go into discussion. Daniel Lee, second.
Thank you. Are there any board member discussion of the motion? Is there any public discussion on the motion?
I feel like I came in prematurely with my presentation on
That's
the
okay. No,
fee.
that's okay.
But since I have the opportunity,
Yep.
I think our primary concern is how people who we want to bring into the state from out of state, which we talked about, are out of state licensees, new students that are looking into a profession in medicine, and we're looking to mitigate the deterrence. And so I think some of our members, most of our members, are concerned a fee which is much higher than those of DOs, actually much higher than those of MDs, incredibly higher than DOs, who we consider our colleagues, and that is going to serve as a deterrent. I understand everything you said, Doctor. I appreciate and understand what you're saying in terms of the longevity of the board, but also understand exactly how this is going to impact the membership and the licensees that you do serve in terms of the numbers and the people's feelings about wanting to continue in this profession.
Thank you. That is relevant stakeholder information. Just comment that this is renewal fees of the license, and also the practicing providers, as well as we have removed some other obstacles to coming to California by modernizing our renewal application, by removing some previous barriers as far as different other requirements to practice in California. And we're also working on this sunset report to obstacles of practitioners in other states, removing some obstacles about them getting a license in California, because certainly we'd want to make sure that there's no unnecessary obstacles to practicing podiatric medicine in California while keeping the public safe. Thank you very much.
Excuse me, this is Kathy Cooper. I would just like to add one thing. I've worked with these numbers now for 10 years, and this increase is $22 a month, $22 to $23 a month. So that's a 24-month period for an additional $532. It doesn't seem to be that much of a deterrent, because when you look at the U.S. labor statistics, doctors of podiatric medicine are upwards of $200,000 a year in income. Additionally, this board voted to get rid of continuing competence, which must save every DPM a few $1,000s a year renewal-wise, because you had to take so many courses. Am I correct? To do your continuing competence, it was costly. So it's not like you can match one for the other, but it's just really a very small amount per month, considering how much the income is for most full-time workers. And it's the privilege of having a board to keep this an autonomous profession. There are 2 new podiatric schools in the country, so if it feels a little dire with association membership numbers and things like that, isn't that just happening everywhere? It's not affecting our numbers. We can ask our licensing person. We've been steady with the amount of licensees that we've had. So we know it's coming, that there's going to be some retirees, but this should set the board up for, before the next sunset, for a healthy reserve. And we don't know what's in the future with expenses and inflation and cost of living and things, but this will secure the board autonomy up until the next sunset, which at that time, if the DPMs in the state, aren't interested, you know what I mean? To do it now, to end the board because we're not funding it properly, I don't think is a service to the people that have supported this board since 1957 to achieve everything you have as a surgeon. Thank you.
May I clarify?
Daniel Lee, just to comment on this matter, I think the numbers can speak for themselves. We've done this meeting with you, Mr. Ryan Spencer, and CPMA before. We have engaged into sharing figures and so forth. I think it's important to the public as a government agency to be clear and transparent as to what we're talking about. This is a renewal fee, like Madam President has emphasized. It should not be confused with other organization fees, such as CPMA and other agencies who are charging on an annual basis. So the public needs to understand, to be clear, that we are comparing things well when it comes to fees and assignments for that. They might be thinking, oh, this is annual, whereas we are renewal fee every 2 years, compared to certain organizations that may be charging every year. So there are differences. Your figure that you express somewhere around 30% of increase, it might be misleading if it's taken out of context because it's every 2 years. And if you divide that, obviously it's a different number.
No.
One can ask themselves, what are the raises for CPMA and how the other agencies have raised too. So it may not be too far away from those figures. But at the end, this is for the protection of our public, you and I included. This is our duty to keep our board independent for the protection of our public in the foot and ankle arena and the podiatric arena. And therefore, I'm adding these comments to the board and to all of us.
Thank you. I think these comments are important. And, to the financial part of it, for the labor documentation, that a full-time working podiatrist mid-career, approximately $200,000 a year income. This is less than $1,000 a year for your license. It's a very small percentage of your income to continue the privilege of practicing, because it's per 2 years. 1850 is less than $1,000 a year for your license for a fully, based on a fully employed mid-career podiatric physician of approximately $200,000 a year. Mr. Spencer, did you have a comment?
I do need to clarify a couple of things, as I'm a little perplexed by the last two comments that were made. To be completely clear, Dr. Lee and Catherine, I think what I mentioned was about licensees, not members of CPMA. You have a growing population of patients. There are shortages in all healing arts professions. We know this, right? Podiatry is not an exception. We do know, talking to the deans of both schools, that they are trying desperately to get students in those seats, and we're working with them to do that. The fees that we're talking about are licensing fees. Not once did I ever mention association fees. Not once did I mention I'm talking about annual fee. And if you do the math, $500 for a 1331 biannual fee is 38% biannually. I did not imply that it was annual. So I appreciate that, Dr. Lee, and I appreciate the comments that were made. But I do want to clarify the comments that were made were accurate to what is before us. And we are concerned about the number of podiatrists, if they're members of CPMA or not. The patients are the ones that we are trying to ensure have proper care. And in order to do that, they need to have podiatrists. We're the ones who fought to make sure that podiatrists were reinstated back into Medi-Cal, because even though you eliminated podiatrists being able to provide care in Medi-Cal, but you didn't eliminate the need of the Medi-Cal beneficiaries. Physicians could still provide podiatric care, but not podiatrists. And so these are things that are very important to us. Look, I understand. This is something I know you guys have to do in your minds, but there are still, like you mentioned, some of the stuff we've done to help make it easier on podiatrists getting here statutorily. There are still discussions that Brian and I will continue to have and make it easier and maybe more desirable, and hopefully even consider if you can still sustain yourselves on a lower fee. If we can't come to that conclusion, we can't. But I still want to have that dialogue. And yes, it's been ongoing, and we're still going to have that discussion. So thank you.
Yes, and I think the board completely agrees that having more well-qualified podiatrists to perform the care for the public of California is in the best interest of this state. So we are looking to continue to make the state a great place to practice podiatric medicine and surgery.
I think we will keep our ears open to it. I don't think there's any doubt with that as far as the public and licensee comments go. If CPMA has any suggestions of how to change that deficit that we can, not ignore, it would be appreciated. And I think also carrying home the message that many times our alignment and new bills are the same to protect the public and advance the profession. And having that joint voice available versus not having a Mr. Haslam and not having this board as a voice probably is a bit dangerous for the profession and for the consumers of California. And I think that's an important message that we take home to everybody. Thank you.
Right, here's the bottom line. In 2026, we're going to be insolvent. What does that mean? If we don't have the right funding, they're going to come and shut our doors. That's it. There will be no Podiatric Medical Board of California. Done. End of story. And the number that was spit out, it was 1850. The numbers that we have crunched, that is the minimum. Now, when you look at a reserve, right, the reserve, the governor's budget, what they like to see is 6 months in reserve. That 1850 is kind of the bottom line. We're balancing on that bottom line. We're not going to hit 6 month reserves. We might, maybe towards the end, increase, but to hit the 6 months reserve, you don't want to know a number that was like $2,700 on a renewal fee. And, where do you go from there, right? So what I'm doing, or what this board is doing, is making a good decision to keep this board afloat, and then we can figure things out. Of course, CPMA, the board, we can work something out, right? But we don't have the funding to go and explore anything. First, we need to get that funding, the bottom line funding, so we stay afloat. That's the end of story. It's now or never.
Any further discussion on the motion we have on the floor for the fee increase for our sunset review? Kathleen, can we go ahead and take a vote on the motion then?
Yes, I just want to clarify.
Certainly.
In February, we had a motion that was 17, what was it? It was a range.
It was a range.
And it was specific to legislation for this year. So I just want to add, could we add to this motion that this is now through the sunset process rather than seeking where Brian is being told by the board to seek legislation? Now, in your motion, could we say, to authorize staff to perform, did I say what it takes to implement 1850 through the sunset? Or, how do you want us to do it? Through the sunset or?
Right, so
Yeah,
this
okay.
this motion would supersede the previous motions
Great.
about a fee increase. This will replace that, a previous motion of earlier this year.
Got it. Okay, so the motion is to authorize staff to perform whatever it takes to implement an 1850 biennial renewal fee for DPMs
Through Section 10 of the Sunset Report,
through Section 10. And there's your motion.
which would supersede the previous motion that you're referring to for us to submit legislation. This
That
is-
was February 23rd,
So instead.
the range, yeah.
Right, so there was a range and a request for you the board to seek legislation. We are replacing that request with this new request of 1850 in the sunset report and not pursuing the legislative action that we voted for in February.
Okay.
Is there any questions or concerns about that this is a replacement for that?
And to be effective January 1st, 2026, am I correct?
Is that what the sunset, is that consistent with what the sunset, except?
Yes, it would be January 1st, 26,
Thank-
As
2026.
soon as we can do it.
Right,
Okay.
right, because it has to be consistent with the acceptance of the sunset report and when that becomes effective.
Okay. Any more discussion, or should we take a vote?
Any further discussion? Yes, please call for the vote.
Okay. Dr. McAloon,
Approve.
Dr. Lee,
Approve.
Dr. Patel,
Approve.
Dr. Glazier,
Approve.
Ms. Elliott.
Approve.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now if we go to section number 9, we're just going to clarify and make sure that this information is correct, which I think it is. But if it's not, then we're going to make some additives to section 9. And basically, these were the issues from the last sunset. So we're just going to make some clarification. Do we need to expand what the progress is? It doesn't call for it, but I want to check just to make sure. So I think there's another motion for section 9.
Very good. I move to amend Section 9 of the Sunset Report to provide the legislature an update on the issues listed in that section, including any efforts that the board is currently taking to address those issues. Staff shall prepare and finalize those updates and may incorporate any necessary explanations or information needed to prepare and finalize the update. May I request a second on that motion?
Daniel Lee, second.
Any board discussion on the motion to have staff prepare and finalize any updates that may become in between our approval of the draft and its submission to the legislature? Any public comment on our motion? Seeing none, can we call for a vote on the motion to allow amendment over Section 9 with any updates from the staff as necessary?
All right. Dr. McAloon,
Approve.
Dr. Lee,
Approve.
Dr. Patel,
Approve.
Dr. Glazier,
Approve.
Ms. Elliott.
Approve.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Before we move on, is there any public comment?
I asked, before calling the vote, I did ask. Yeah. But thank you for the reminder, because sometimes I forget.
We're over here reading everything. so
Exactly.
We can't
It's all good.
multitask anymore. We're too old.
Please continue with your sunset report. Let's see where we left off.
There's going to be another motion, and this is going to be a general motion, and it's going to be kind of throughout the whole document, including Section 7 of the Sunset Report. And this is another, any technical changes or anything like that that needs to happen.
So are you suggesting only Section 7
I
or
think it's just seven, or
such
section-
as?
Yeah,
Oh,
such as.
such
yeah.
as is fine? Okay. I'd like to make a motion to move that, to authorize staff to incorporate any necessary information or take any necessary steps to prepare and finalize any changes, updates to the Sunset Report, such as Section 7.
Is it limited to Section 7? Or?
No,
Okay.
such as.
No. And then the next motion is going to gather everything in the full report, so we don't have to gather. And the last motion is going to be that you're going to give authority to myself and staff to finalize the report under certain parameters. So we can go ahead with that, the first motion.
So the first motion is more generic,
Right.
moving that staff add board members' requested changes to the Sunset Report, such as Section 7, and incorporate any necessary information or take any necessary steps to prepare and finalize changes.
Okay.
Okay, the last big motion, and this is the one
What
that,
do we have to
Wait,
vote on?
wait, I
We have to
need a
vote on that
second.
one.
Yeah.
I need a second.
Samantha Patel, second.
Brian's ready to go.
can't you guys
Any
hurry up?
further discussion on this motion? Yes,
I still need a second.
Dr.
right?
Patel did.
Okay,
I'm
got
sorry,
it. All right.
I was maybe blocking. So Dr. Patel, second the generic motion template. And is there any further discussion on that? Any public comment on that? So just for clarity, these motions are, what will happen today is this board will approve or not the draft that we have of the sunset report, but there's still approximately 2 months before will be turned in. And on occasion, as the draft is being prepared, small minor details of clarity, we're giving the staff led by Mr. Nasland some room to add additional information that the legislature might need, some data that might be required, so that they can receive this report without necessarily having the board to have to re-vote on submitting the board as the sunset report as a whole. So these are cleanup amendments, which are designating what authority this board is giving to our staff led by our executive officer for adding any additional, and we'll give even more specific parameters in the next motion. But that's the reason for these amendments, is to make sure that we have approved the sunset review draft as a whole, and for minor additions that the staff has our approval to go ahead and add those to the report before its submission to the legislature. So that's what these are about.
Okay.
And if there's no current further discussion right now, if we could probably vote on that amendment. Thank you.
And this is also McAloon and Patel.
Correct.
Okay. Dr. McAloon,
Approve.
Dr. Lee,
Approved.
Dr. Patel,
Approved.
Dr. Glazier,
Approved.
Miss Elliott.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Thank you. I have, what I think is my final motion for our sunset report. I motion to approve the draft sunset report with the fee request added in section 10 and any updates added to section 9, and authorize staff to make any non-substantive changes necessary to finalize the report, including but not limited to clarifying language, explaining existing board processes, programs, and activities, making grammatical and technical changes, and incorporating updated financial information or other data as it becomes available. Staff is directed to finalize the report in accordance with these guidelines and submit it to the legislature prior to the due date. May I have a second on this amendment?
Seconded.
Thank you. Any
Who
board
was it?
discussion of this amendment? Oh, Dr. Glazer.
Okay, let's see over there.
Any public comment on this amendment? And so, as I mentioned, the goal of this motion is for this board, what we're doing is we're approving the draft of the sunset report as it is, with giving staff some guidelines about what information can be clarified or added prior to the legislation, submitting it to the legislator without having to bring that back to the board, as long as they're non-substantive and adding more information and clarity. If there's no further discussion, can we call for the vote, please?
All right. Dr. McAloon,
I approve.
Dr. Lee,
Approved.
Dr. Patel,
Approve.
Dr. Glazer,
Approve.
Miss Elliott.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Brian,
Okay.
is there any other further discussion or action about the sunset report?
What's that?
Do you have any further discussion or action about the sunset report for us?
I do not at this point. What I'll be doing is, as we update, I will push out individually to the board members so they could see the progress and they can kind of see, and they'll be highlighted before we submit the final report.
Fantastic. That'll be very helpful. Thank you.
Oh, I see, okay, all right.
I'm trying to see what's next here.
Okay, so what I'd like to do, next, item number 2 under the executive management report is discussion action regarding appointing new board officers and committee positions for 2025. That's me too, I think. Well, I'm going to do half of it. Then I'm going to kick the can. So our board officers run the annual year, so January 1 to December 31st is the time frame for our officer positions. And as I opened the meeting, I mentioned that my term as president will be expiring then at the end of this year, and starting 2025, we'll need new officers. And as president, one of my duties is to nominate officers for a slate for the next year. And then the board approves the nominations that I make. Is that appropriate? So I'd like to announce then my slate for the recommended officer positions for 2025. For president, I nominate Dr. Daniel Lee. For vice president, I nominate Dr. Devin Glazer. And for secretary, I nominate Dr. Sumar Patel. May I submit this slate to this board for their approval? Is that something that we vote on? Do I need to ask for public discussion on the slate? Okay. Is there a second on the slate for officers for next year?
So second.
Thank you.
Who's it?
Dr. Glazer.
Glazer, okay.
Any discussion amongst
Discussion.
the board for regarding the slate of officers? Questions, comments, concerns? Any public comment on our slate for officers? Great, thank you. Shall we vote?
Okay. Dr. McAloon,
I approve.
Dr. Lee,
Approve.
Dr. Patel,
Approve.
Dr. Glazer,
Approve.
Ms. Elliott.
Approved.
Motion passes.
Fantastic, thank you. The second part of item 2 is committee positions for 2025. It is my opinion that the committees is the selected at the that the president has the privilege. That's a presidential privilege. That's what I was trying to think of. That's been swinging around a lot lately. Presidential privilege. As my opinion, that the privilege of the president to set the committees for their term. Therefore, I'd like to defer to Dr. Lee, who has just been elected to be our president 2025. I'd like to defer to him to choose the committee assignments for 2025. Is that something that you're prepared for today, or perhaps soon?
I'm just taking everything in
Sure
right
enough.
now, so as of now, I'm not the president
Right.
until the end of the day.
Well, until January, right. So what I,
Hold on to that
right.
chair.
So what I propose is I would like to ask Dr. Lee, with working with Mr. Naslin, to prepare the committee assignments for 2025, and then you can release those at your convenience. Is that agreeable?
Yes.
And those do not have to be voted on by the board, correct? Committee assignments? No,
I
that's
don't think so.
that's a privilege of the president. So
Right.
I recommend between now and December 31st that you exercise that privilege
Right.
and do the committee assignments.
Thank you.
And a suggestion is, it's always good to have committee members in their same committee, because you start bouncing from committee to committee. You're starting to say, okay, now I got to learn something, here, when you're kind of going mainstream, and you're starting to understand whatever, if you're in licensing enforcement, and if you start bouncing around, it's kind of like, oh man,
Yeah.
it's you lose a little bit of continuity.
Right, and looking
Sounds
at
good.
the benefit of, because we're a small board, it's likely that all, if not most of us, will eventually serve as president. And so I think it is valuable to, A, the benefit of continuity, but also B, the benefit of serving on multiple committees, so that by the time you are the president, you've been on the different committees, or at least so that you have that experience to speak to. So there's pros, since there's so few of us, it's balancing those needs of continuity and exposure to the different committees, I think. And then, also looking about, because we usually have to serve on 2 committees because of the size of our board, kind of balancing that as well. And plus, and then your chairs, assigning the chairs, and trying not to, maybe everyone has one chair and one secondary committee or something like that, can be helpful in figuring out the chart.
Yes. Yes.
You bet. And then in addition, it's also my opinion on item number 3, and I took this presidential privilege, and I think then I should give it forward, is selecting the dates for our meetings. I also think is a privilege of the president to do in consultation, of course, with staff and his fellow board members and her. However, I also defer the setting of the dates to the new president for 2025 as a privilege of your being president.
Okay, I'll prepare that. Thank you.
I don't have anything else for executive management report. Brian, do you?
I do not.
I have a question. Do we need to do anything about well, I understand the seats are appointed by the governor, but is there anything we need to do as a board in terms of having an open seat?
I will direct that question to Mr. Naslin.
What was that question?
About an open seat with,
Oh, a vacancy?
yeah, vacancy.
Yeah, we do have a vacancy, and it's a public governor's appointed position. I've been asking for years. And so it's just one of those things, you know, I can only do so much and work with DCA, and, you know, that's what we're doing. It's the governor's office and their appointing office. It's, you know, kind of, I'm sure it's been recognized. So, yeah.
No, I think, are you?
I'll be working with our EO
Okay.
for those dates and pass it to him as soon as we can.
Okay, so we won't pick dates at this meeting.
Correct.
Correct.
Very good. So we have a few more agenda items to attend to today. Most importantly, it's our discussion action regarding any amendments to our strategic plan, specifically in the area of diversity, equity, inclusion. And I believe we have our facilitators have joined us for our meeting. So I have a question. Is that executive session or is that public session for our DEI?
DEI is a specialized agendized unit. It's not under executive management.
No, but I mean, is it under public or?
It's open, yeah.
It's open, it's open session.
It's open, yes.
Yes, it's not closed
yeah.
session, it's open session.
Yeah.
That was my question. Okay. Let me see, let's find out. So, a suggestion has been made to me that agenda item number 7, future agenda items, that we take that under consideration now, so that after we do our DEI discussion, item number 6, that we don't have to come back to item number 7. Is that agreeable to the
That's fine.
rest of the board? Okay, and then plus we don't forget to do it. Very good. Okay, so at this time, I'd like to ask first any board members if they have any future agenda items they'd like to bring forward for our next meeting. Seeing none at this time, is there any public members who have any future agenda items they'd like to bring forward to this meeting? Seeing none,
That's fine.
fantastic, thank you. May I, our
How
next,
about we take a little break?
that's what I was
There's-
gonna say, I was getting there.
And there's some food coming anytime, so.
Yes, so I propose that we take a 10-minute break before proceeding with our agenda item number 6, discussion action regarding amendments to our strategic plan in regards to DEI. It is currently 11:20. May I suggest that we reconvene at, gavel in at 11:30?
Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Thank you for the enjoying our break. We're going to resume our meeting with our discussion and action regarding our DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion amendments to our board's current strategic plan. I would like to ask our facilitators to introduce themselves, if you could be so kind, because I didn't think to print that out like I should have. Try to remember, I did forget to do that, so if you would be so kind to introduce yourselves, I would be grateful for that. Thank you.
I'm going to give everyone a moment to get their meal and have a seat. handout.
Oh, do you, that for
Yep.
us? Okay,
Yep.
great, okay.
Oh, you're so welcome. I know council, I know PO.
So I printed it out. I'm very clever back to that office then. It was just the minutes. And I
I have in here.
I have them on my desk.
I only printed mine. No, I put some here. Oh, no, these are pasted from the stuff I had at the bottom. Sorry. I'll bring them here.
Ladies, I think we're ready whenever you are.
Wonderful. So your stuff will be up on the screen. So good afternoon, or is it still morning? So we are from the Strategic Planning Office, Solid, and we are here to help you update your existing strategic plan with information and insights gathered from the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Survey and Environmental Scan report that we had given you. So my name is Ann Fisher, and with me is Tricia St. Clair. And we will be switching off as far as leading the discussion, but we first wanted to give you a framework so that you can sort of have a perspective on what all we're going to be doing today. As facilitators, we are playing a neutral role in this. We're not here to spin things to make you look good. We're not here to spin things to make DCA look good. We're just going to go ahead and capture the facts. We're going to give structure to the discussion, and we're going to make sure that we understood and wrote down what you meant so that we don't have any misunderstandings later. We're hoping that we can minimize distractions. I know that you're sitting in an unusual format for this meeting due to the screen, but thank you for your flexibility. We'd like, of course, for this to be a safe space where everyone's participation is encouraged and everyone's contributions are respected. I don't have any reason to think that won't happen, but I just wanted to say that out loud. There are no silly questions or stupid suggestions. We're here to listen to everyone. And at the end of the discussion, we'd like for you to be able to reach consensus, which basically means is this concept something I can live with even if I didn't quite support it fully at the beginning? Or even if my pet idea didn't get through, is it okay if we move forward without it? Try and reach consensus as a group and speak with one voice as a board. So the first thing we're gonna do is refresh your memory. I believe you all had some DEI training already, but we're gonna refresh your memory and have this really, forefront of your mind as we do our discussion. We're gonna do a quick review of strategic planning and why we bother doing this at all. We're gonna go through this DEI supplement process. We've done this with a number of other boards and bureaus at DCA. This is in response to the governor's initiative. We're gonna refresh your memory on the environmental scan report, which is what everyone said in the survey. And then we're gonna take a quick look at your mission, vision, values, just to make sure that they still resonate with you and seem appropriate. Then we'll dive into the actual work, which is looking at your existing strategic plan, and I have handouts for you all, and then seeing if there's anything you think could be added or revised, if there's any new objectives that the survey results called out for, and we'll develop those brand new here if you choose to add anything. So the first two videos are gonna be your refresher and encouragement from DCA Director Kim Kirkmeyer. So relax and have a seat, and we'll be taking a look at those. Oh, yeah. I wonder if we have to do the source for the projector? That shouldn't matter because it's all. Well, the screen shows, but
You're trying to get this over there?
yeah. Goodness gracious, thank you for your patience. As you know, there are legitimate sunspots. That's why everyone at night can see the aurora from all sorts of amazing places, but it also has some issues with us. I'm not sure why it was displaying the PowerPoint perfectly. Okay. That's better. It's like buffering or something, but it's on your desktop. On your desktop. This is quite something.
Maybe just a good old fashioned unplug.
I mean, I can get at it. You want to try and plug the projector in here? It's not right, I only have right. not fantastic. Let's see. You think we should try and stick with that, or is that? That's not audible to you guys, is it? Not really.
You have to select maybe the sound output, maybe the projector.
Maybe.
Just go to your sound settings. You might have to
Oh,
get
I
out of
see.
there. So your Microsoft settings. So sound
Output.
output, I'm gonna change that to speakers.
Okay, try it.
Let's give it a try. It sounded like your computer speaker.
Yeah, it sure did. Now there's nothing. Okay.
And you got that muted. This is muted. That icon right
Oh.
there.
The training content was
Still
collaboratively
this.
built
Well,
using resources, research, and training with the goal to further our understanding. Hi,
You
my
don't?
name is Lisa Bacon, training manager with the
Can you hear
Department of Consumer Affairs, Solid Training and Planning
it
Solutions.
is coming from mine.
I'm excited to bring today's training video about diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI.
But you can
to
understand
all
her?
of you.
Okay,
My
let's do
training
this.
experience
all the way
in
up, baby.
DEI goes back to 2015 across multiple departments, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to support DCA's DEI efforts. What does DEI mean? That's the title of today's training video and is truly reflective of what we will cover. The training content was collaboratively built using resources, research, and training with the goal to further our understanding of this important topic. This training video will provide a foundation of the general concepts, understanding, and importance of DEI. The Solid team is honored and excited to be a part of DCA's DEI initiatives, and we will continue to expand our commitment to DEI through both training and learning. I'm also proud to share this year, every Solid trainer will be DEI certified, and more DEI trainings are on the horizon. I expect this will only be the beginning of exciting things to come for DCA. So now, let's get into it. What does DEI mean? Our learning objectives for this training will be to understand what diversity means and who it relates to, why it's necessary to choose equity versus equality. We'll discuss the benefits reflected in our work culture when we practice inclusion, and I'll share several examples of how to integrate DEI. I think it's important to mention this training's alignment with our mission statement, which is to advance a diverse, equitable, and inclusive California Department of Consumer Affairs for all. To understand diversity, we first need to define what it means. Diversity is all the characteristics and experiences which define each of us as individuals and the groups to which we belong. Often there's a mindset which associates diversity with only individuals who fall under the protected classes. Diversity is relevant and inclusive of every human being based on each aspect of our lives. We're multi-dimensional beings, which makes us diversely unique. Race and ethnicity are frequently misunderstood. People don't always recognize or identify themselves with one simplistic and usually limited category listed on a demographic questionnaire. To shed some light on this, here are the definitions. Race is biological and refers to groups of people often based on physical characteristics such as the color of their skin. Ethnicity is a broader term than race, and it's your cultural identity. It's chosen or learned from your culture and family experiences, such as a certain custom, traditions, and languages you've been exposed to within the group you feel you belong. Someone might say their race is black, yet they associate their ethnicity with Portuguese. Or another person might say their race is white and their ethnicity is Irish. I'm a fan of this diversity iceberg because I feel it's a good representation of human diversity. Above the waterline, we can only see about 20 to 30% of an iceberg. The other 70 to 80% is below the surface. When we first interact with someone, there are features we can quickly identify in a short amount of time, such as their body language, an accent when they speak, possibly their gender, and how they're dressed. But these only represent very limited and sometimes inaccurate characteristics of the person. There are numerous layers and dimensions to who we really are, such as our education, sexual orientation, work ethic, strengths, life experiences, and personality traits. And it's impossible to identify these core attributes within a person until we've invested the time to find out. And this is when unconscious bias comes into play, above the surface, when our brains quickly respond to a person or group of people simply based on limited external perceptions. Our brain is biologically wired to rapidly intake information all around us to determine our safety. It's the mechanism which activates our fight or flight response. This is also known as implicit bias. It's an unconscious response and inherent to all humans. We're exposed to influences from an early age based on our environment. Our family, education from schools, community, television, movies, marketing, and one of the most powerful influences in our culture today is social media. Because of these unconscious influences, our brains begin to form stereotypes about the society around us. People who look or act a certain way are categorized in our minds based on these mental intakes. Have you ever had that gut feeling when you've been around someone for 5 seconds? It's important to listen to our intuition, but this becomes a problem when we have a strong reaction to someone based on very limited information. We want to trust that feeling and sometimes revere it as a superpower, but we need to make sure we pause and ask ourselves truthfully what prompted those feelings. This is why unconscious bias tends to have a negative connotation. It is how our brains work, but we have to hold ourselves accountable for how we respond, especially when it's based on an unfair judgment. If we're brave enough to ask and listen to how we've impacted the people around us, we can become more aware of our own biases and reprogram our brain's response system. Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now I want to talk about the E in DEI and the difference between equality versus equity. Equality happens when we provide the same, equal treatment to everyone, and it can feel fair. When we choose to give equity, we create pathways to equal outcomes by recognizing that some people and communities have unequal starting points. This picture reflects what it looks like when we give everyone equal resources. Our intentions may be good, but when we check in and ask people how they're doing, we'll find out not everyone was able to participate. If we check in with people first and find out what they need, it levels the playing field for everyone to succeed. Equality is often related to what most of us know as the golden rule. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. But what you need to succeed can look very different from the people around you. Equity is a verb and a choice. We should all practice the platinum equity rule, which is ask people what they need, then choose to give it so they feel respected. We all deserve respect. Aretha Franklin sang it best. RESPECT, find out what it means to me. I love this quote from Maya Angelou. She says, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And this is when inclusion comes in. Inclusion is the practice it takes to create a positive work environment where the differences of every team member is recognized, understood, and valued. Inclusion is about building trust within our working relationships. One attempt isn't going to automatically change everything, and it's not always easy because we don't automatically know what everyone needs or how people prefer to engage. Inclusion takes time and practice. The key is we need to be curious, ask, listen, and invite the people you serve to provide input. Don't just ask for their feedback after the project is said and done. Give everyone involved a voice and a seat at the table. When we practice inclusion, it lifts morale. Retention increases because people like coming to work. When people feel valued and heard, they're innovative, which inspires collaboration within teams, and DCA becomes a destination employer. Simon Sinek believes the role of a leader is not to come up with all the great ideas. The role of a leader is to create an environment in which great ideas can happen. How can we create inclusive engagement? Hold meetings regularly, then give people options for how to communicate and provide input. In work groups, extroverts tend to speak up and sometimes dominate conversations. If an introvert or analytical person who needs a little more time to problem solve isn't given an opportunity, great ideas and insight can be lost. Groupthink, also known as conformity bias, can quickly contaminate a group when everyone's voice isn't heard and understood. When a special assignment or project is given, make sure the goals and expectations are clear. Give everyone on the team an opportunity to learn and grow from a special assignment. Create a mentoring opportunity by pairing someone more experienced with someone who's new to the project. This knowledge transfer is ideal for succession planning. There is a DEI section in the Strategic Planning Environmental Scan. It will centralize input on DEI matters and contain demographic information collected. This section can help further inform the board as it considers impacts of policy decision. Our mission is to provide outstanding support services, oversight, and innovative solutions to boards and bureaus that regulate California professionals and vocations so that through this partnership, all Californians are informed, empowered, and protected. Our vision, together protecting California consumers. Our values, accountability, communication, diversity, employees, integrity, leadership, service, and transparency. As a board, you should ensure that your mission, vision, and values supports change and evolves to meet the needs of all Californians. We want all Californians to feel accepted in seeking services we provide. As board members, you are the leaders of the industry you regulate. In this next section, we will discuss actionable areas to incorporate DEI in 4 areas: policy, licensing, enforcement, and outreach. In policy, we need to ask ourselves if the decisions we are considering will lead to the success of everyone involved. Reflect on who will benefit from or be burdened by the proposal or decision being considered. Are the needs of one demographic different from another geographic group? Think equity. What data or metrics will you use to evaluate the impacts of your decisions? Leverage methods that increase public input and engagement, such as workshops, surveys, and multilingual communications. Actively engage with diverse and underserved communities. Reach out to associations, colleges, interested parties, other licensing or regulatory bodies. Utilize the strategic planning process. Review information collected through the new environmental scans, which incorporate DEI questions. In licensing, when licensees reflect communities they serve, it expands access to all. Use plain language. Simplify communication so it's easy to understand and complete. Expand multilingual resources for applicants and consumers. Consider additional pathways to gain experience and/or education for licensure. Expand outreach for subject matter experts to ensure the exam development process is inclusive. When it comes to enforcement, drive fair outcomes and protect the vulnerable. Review enforcement data and trends. Update enforcement policies, processes, and procedures to mitigate unintended consequences to impacted populations through increased engagement with consumers, stakeholders, and communities. When you build your team, consider the needs of all the communities we serve. Do you need more bilingual staff? Do you need additional staff in certain areas of the state? Expand your outreach through HR, job fairs, and inquire about other opportunities you may not have considered before. As you begin to integrate DEI, remember you can't take the bias from the person, but you can remove the bias from the process. Through outreach, you can increase access and opportunity when you reach and meet people where they're at. Do you know what the second most common language in California is? Spanish. So when you translate resource materials based on the people you serve, you expand language access. Develop multilingual communications for social media posts, applications, forms, and other resources you provide. Publish written and video testimonials from your diverse consumers, which reflect their age, race, gender, and cultural differences. As you begin to integrate DEI, remember to leverage all the resources available to you at DCA. The Equal Employment Opportunity Office administers the American Sign Language and Real-Time Captioning Services contract. The EEO office conducts the department-wide language survey to identify the public it serves, the languages spoken, and the bilingual resources available at DCA to ensure equal access is provided for all consumers. The Consumer Information Center administers a contract that provides phone language services to consumers in over 200 languages. The Office of Human Resources administers the bilingual pay program, including the establishment of bilingual positions. The Office of Publications, Design, and Editing coordinates requests for the translation of written materials. The Solid Training and Planning Solutions offers DEI-related trainings, surveys, meeting facilitation, and development of strategic plans. The Office of Professional Examination Services offers examination translation and adaptation services. I want to share one of the many examples of how the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology has integrated DEI.
The California Board of Barbering and Cosmetology celebrates the ever-changing diversity of California's consumers and licensees, so we can establish a quorum, which is why the board has made a concerted effort to expound on its language accessibility. Here are some of our achievements. Please enter 1 for Spanish and 2 for all other languages. Upon request, each individual that visits the board in person is given the opportunity to access an interpreter via the language line phone service if the individual does not feel they are able to effectively communicate with board staff. Let's take a look. Good morning. How can I help you? Okay. Is there another language that you prefer? Do you see one on this list? Okay. A unit within the Department of Consumer Affairs called the Consumer Information Center, or CIC, provides phone agents who assist consumers and licensees in English, Spanish, and more than 240 other languages with the assistance of a third-party vendor via the toll-free number 1-800-952-5210. Phone agents usually serve as the public's first point of contact. They provide many services to both consumers and licensees. CIC phone agents answer nearly 1 million calls per year. The board provides 3 additional language access pages in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean languages on its website, www.barbercosmo.ca.gov. The English homepage has the option for Google Translate. Almost every publication, form, bulletin, and trifold the board provides is translated into Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean. Items such as the self-inspection worksheet and the what to expect when you're inspected trifold are available in these languages. Select videos such as foot spa cleaning and disinfecting have been translated into the Vietnamese language and posted to the board's website.
Hi, my name is Kyle with the State Board. I'm here doing inspection.
When inspecting salons with Vietnamese-speaking individuals where violations have been found, inspectors utilize a translated violation cover sheet, which contains a simplified, translated explanation of select common violations. Citations that are issued to nail salons are provided in both the English and Vietnamese languages to the establishment owner. Board inspectors, exam site staff, and headquarters staff receive updated, specialized training on how to utilize an interpreter via the language line phone service to address language access situations found in their respective job roles. Interpreters are provided free of charge to petitioners in disciplinary review hearings upon request, so that each licensee can fully understand their hearing and the additional information provided at the hearing. The California Board of Barbering and Cosmetology is dedicated to providing all individuals with meaningful access to the board's services, programs, and activities. We are working hard to expand our language access and will continue to do so.
When we think about DEI, remember diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and the outcome is belonging. UC Berkeley's Others and Belonging Institute states, belonging describes values and practices where no person is left out of the circle of concern. Belonging means more than having just access. It means having a meaningful voice and the opportunity to participate. We need to make sure our efforts aren't just transactional. They need to be transformative, and it will take time. So remember, DEI is a journey, not a destination.
All right, and then we're going to have a little encouragement from DCA Director Kim Kirkmeyer. 1 second.
In 2022, Governor Newsom issued an executive order directing state agencies and departments to build upon the state's efforts to advance equity by taking new concrete actions to address disparities and expand opportunity for all Californians. The governor's executive order builds upon and strengthens the state's commitment to a California for all. We all have an important role in this effort. As you develop your board's strategic plan, building in and embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into the goals and objectives is one of the most effective ways we can make progress and produce results with long-lasting impacts. The work that the boards and bureaus do touches the lives of every Californian. That is why it is so important to take into account every Californian when building out the board's mission, vision, values, and goals. The department's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee and the SOLID team are available as a resource to help you in meeting those goals. Thank you for being a part of making our department a diverse, equitable, and inclusive California Department of Consumer Affairs for all.
All right, thank you. Now we'll go ahead and return the presentation to Tricia. Almost. There we go. All right. So as we go through the strategic planning this afternoon, we're going to answer, the first place we start is where are we now? So in doing that, we're going to review the mission statement, the values that we hold, and the environmental scan, which is the survey report. And we're going to look at where we're going, which is going to be the vision statement, what's our ideal future. We're going to see goals, the 5 different breakout areas, and we're going to look at all the objectives that we had originally started with under those goals. And then we're going to try and plan out how we're going to get there, and that's going to be the action planning step that we'll undertake with Brian and Kathy and the board staff to really put accountability on what we're going to do and what order we're going to do it and when we hope to have it done. So in building a strategic plan, the mission, values, and vision sort of make up the first layer, the first foundation of the strategic plan. And these are fairly permanent, like in a house. They don't change very often unless there's very specific circumstances. The goals then make up the next layer, which would be like the walls and rooms in your house. These are permanent as well, but they have the potential to change a little more often than the foundation. And then the objectives make up the third layer, which is the paints and the furnishings, and these do get updated more often, usually every 4 or 5 years or so. And then the action items are the steps you take to make updates and changes to the paint and furnishings in your house. So let's take a step back from the house metaphor and define these. The mission, values, and vision are really the core of the board. It's the purpose for your existence. The goals are the desired conditions that your organization needs to achieve in order to be successful at its mission. The goals are sometimes directly or indirectly mentioned in the mission statement, but they can also be units or departments within the board staff. To better understand the importance of goals, let's review the objectives. The objectives are the individual, measurable efforts taken to reach the goal. So objectives are developed from the observations of weaknesses and strengths, and they can be assigned to projects, such as something that you might have seen in your sunset report. And then the action items are the specific tasks and plans to accomplish those objectives. So now in this DEI supplement session, it was prompted from the governor's executive order, and we're going to try and consider all individuals across the state and make sure that we're creating pathways to equal outcomes for everyone. There are 5 steps to our strategic planning DEI supplement process. We started meeting with Brian and Kathy and got together some of the goals and timelines and the processes. And then our next step was to do the surveys, which most of you took, and then we analyzed the data and compiled a report that's been shared with you. Today, we're halfway through. We're in the planning session. We're going to review the environmental scan survey results, and then we're going to take a look at creating some objectives or revising some objectives if we need to. The next step after that will be Trish and I will develop a revised plan. And then hopefully at your next board meeting, you'll have the opportunity to approve the amendments that we're making and deciding on today. And then will come action planning, where we will meet with staff to implement the changes that you've decided to make. So our environmental scan is the survey report that you got. And it's basically a study in how effective the board is in accomplishing its goals, and its response to the profession as a whole and in like the world events. So some of the DEI questions that we'll want to keep in mind are keeping in mind the different perspectives around some ideas and priorities. Not everyone particularly agrees that, a 4-year college education is the only way to gain knowledge. There might be other ways. Any unnecessary requirements or barriers to licensure. For instance, if there are, things that are required to take the exam, but that might not really be necessary, you could take a look at pulling those out. Outreach and connection to all Californians, which means rural, urban, small towns, other languages, other income areas, people who've never particularly heard of a podiatrist before. And then furthering equal access to opportunities, which is sort of making this profession known and making it achievable in every little kid's mind. So as we did our survey, it was, as you all know, it's kind of tough to get feedback from your peers in the profession. We did get 36 external stakeholders. Most of those were licensees, but we also put the word out to consumers, educators, everyone we could think of. And then the board members, 2 of you had the time to do the survey, and then staff. So we had 39 responses total. Even though that's a relatively small number, we did work with the data that we had to identify some trends. And keep in mind that the trends we identified might not be objectively true, but they are the perception of people who did take the time to do the survey. They might represent opportunities for you to take some action, but that's going to be your judgment call. So if we'll go ahead and take a minute to look at the mission statement. Does this still seem like this is the reason you exist? Anything you would think about changing? Seeing some nods? Okay, great. And then the values that you've identified as being core to the way you operate. You already have diversity, equity, and inclusion in here, which is something that it's the biggie that people choose to add, but you've already got it covered. Are there any other values that you think are important, or are any of these less important than they used to be?
I think that even today for the meeting, we're articulating our values and the decisions that we're making today. We have comments on many of those values today as we're undertaking our agenda items.
Okay, so pretty satisfied with the group as it stands? Great, wonderful. And then your vision statement of an ideal future. Does that still seem like it fits what you're doing?
Right, we're protecting the public and making sure that the doctors are taking care of the citizens of California.
Right, okay. Did you want to add anything in here about access to podiatric care, or
Accessible, yes.
maybe drop the word accessible in? So, let's see. Right, yeah. Right.
Saying that all Californians have access to California licensed doctors for recognition to provide.
Okay, so all Californians
That-
have access
To
to?
all podiatrists. That, maybe not exactly that wording, but.
Yeah, all Californians have access to safe and competent podiatric care.
Oh, okay. Okay,
From
License.
licensed doctors.
okay. Mhm. I like it.
That sounds more inclusive.
It does, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nice improvement. Great. Great. Super. Wonderful. So the roles and responsibilities of you all as board members today are to, keep in mind consumer protection is your mandate. Every once in a while, we'll talk to a group who feels that they should be advocating for the profession, and we have to sort of bring them back to the idea that that's not your role, it's consumer protection, that's why we're here. And then keep in mind the available staff time and resources. It would be wonderful if perhaps you had a chance to make a presentation at a high school in California, but I think that's probably above and beyond the ability of the staff. So, just if you think that we have too many objectives, certainly voice that. If you feel like you need more than the current allotted time to to achieve all your objectives, stand up and put out the idea that you might need another year. So we'll just, try and keep a focus on the current and priority realistic ideas. You're going to rely on your own expertise primarily, but we also gave you the environmental scan. We've got a workbook that we had passed out for you to jot some ideas down. We are going to pass out this current plan that you will have the opportunity to modify. So use your perspective as leaders to put out any ideas you choose. So your current strategic plan runs from 23 to 27. So if you want to revise some of your current items, you can. And then if you want to create any new objectives, you certainly can. And as a reminder to consider who's going to be benefiting from or burdened by any decisions that you make. Are there needs that might be different for various demographic groups or geographic regions? Once you have implemented things, how are you going to measure the effect on any given population? What data and metrics are you going to need to collect to measure whether you've impacted the populations you hope to reach? So there's a lot to keep in mind. So basically your instructions are we're going to go through each of the goal areas and each of the existing objectives, and we're going to either develop new ones or modify the other ones, and we're going to try and confirm that these objectives are all SMARTY. You may have heard the term SMART goals, which is specific and measurable and actionable and realistic and time-based. And now we're adding the IE to make sure that they're inclusive and equitable. And we've got an illustration of this in that if someone perhaps was going to have an enforcement objective that talks about, well, the issue that we're having is untrained staff and lack of clear policies and procedures, that callers are getting mixed advice from different people. And the why address it would be that there's an inconsistent application of the law. The board could map out some current procedures and write clear policies and procedures and train all the staff so that everyone's on the same page. And in that way, the outcome would be that everything's clarified, everyone's trained up, and everything is consistent that goes out to the licensees, to the public. And so this is a SMART objective because it's specific and it's actionable, realistic, time-based, measurable, inclusive, and equitable. So those are the sorts of things we're hoping for. So I'm going to take a second to pass out your materials. And if you do get a chance to take notes before you came, you're welcome to take those out if you need to go back to the desk. And certainly. And then I should have probably confirmed at the outreach, Dr. McAloon, is it true that Samantha Yu Chang was not able to attend? That is right. Okay. And she didn't communicate to you any of her ideas that she wanted to make sure got included? She did not. Okay, all right, fair enough. All right. So the first goal area is enforcement. And I'm assuming that the summary statement of what the enforcement goal area is about probably covers protecting consumers, investigating complaints, enforcing laws, regulations, professional standards. I don't think there's anything we need to really edit or change about that definition. Okay. So as we did the survey and we got some trends and results back, we know that the questions we asked on the survey were very general, and they weren't, they weren't specifically targeted at any of the goal areas, but some of them are going to be helpful. Some different perspectives about ideas and priorities. Stakeholders suggested request the feedback. During doing surveys, doing more outreach, collaborating with other groups. So those are some ideas. Unnecessary requirements or barriers to licensure, we'll probably talk more about that in the licensure goal area. Outreach and connection, talking about the value of the newsletter and links from the website. We'll talk about more specifically in the outreach goal area. And then furthering access, discussion suggestions came in about outreach to students, reporting what feedback you get, so it's sort of a transparency issue, lowering the fees, the licensure fee. And then there were people who said that they felt that no action was needed, that it wasn't the board's role and everything was perfectly equal. And that's one idea too. So you've got your handout with the 4 objectives that are currently in your strategic plan. Do you see any areas that you'd like to edit? Maybe expand or change the wording to make it a little more inclusive?
And number one, that has, any opportunity we have when we're amongst our colleagues to encourage them to participate in the board process, especially those of us who ask questions about enforcement. My first thing always to ask them, hey, have you ever served as an expert or consultant? Because being inclusive and the more licensees have experience with how the process works and peer review, I think benefits. And so another possibility, including DEI, thought about ensuring an adequate quantity of diverse qualified experts and consultants. And that would mean many things, Northern California versus Southern California, coastal versus rural, private practice versus medical groups. Diversity, as you saw in the first slides, diversity means every single characteristic, those you think of and those you don't. But I think then, with that definition of diverse, adding that into our line 1, I think would help keep that in mind as we're recruiting candidates for that.
Absolutely. Wonderful. I'm thrilled. We came in with a couple of ideas in our pocket in case you guys came up blank, and that was the very first one. So thank you. Great. Any other ideas on either modifications or anything maybe brand new that you might? I'll step down.
When somebody is filing a complaint, is it available on different languages?
Yes, the medical board does this.
Oh, so do the complaints come in through the med board interface? Oh, interesting. Okay, great.
Because you're such a small board, we do access resources from the medical board with this so that we don't have to recreate things that they already have in place.
Right.
Because they're small and already struggling financially.
Right.
So to borrow resources from other medical boards is very helpful.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. Good. Good to know. All right. Are there any new issues that you think maybe should be included that you want to tackle?
I think one of the issues of enforcement that we spoke about at our board meeting today is tracking who, what, where is our enforcement issues most centered around. For example, that might have identified certain groups where maybe more outreach educational opportunities. Is it more people in the latter years of their practice, or is it more in the newer years of their practice? Is it more people in medical groups or private practice? And so perhaps when we talked about today about capturing data about the types of enforcement and type of providers that seeing are there patterns in enforcement?
Right, identify patterns.
Patterns in enforcement that might help us better outreach to keep safe. I mean, we want to have fewer
Right,
complaints.
complaints.
Fewer orders of fewer cases needing to go to the AG's office and
Right.
and so if we can see patterns to help us identify where we could take action.
Absolutely.
Decrease, fewer complaints and fewer violations would be fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah. So, now the staff can also help. Do you already track sort of the patterns in your enforcement complaints? So like Dr. McAloon was saying, you know, is it more long-standing licensees who maybe haven't kept up with new trends? Is it new graduates who just don't have the experience? Is it, you know, some of the private practice versus other, you know, group practice? Okay, so that would be something in the future to construct a database or some tracking system.
So there is a system in place, and I guess we're just refining what are we tracking?
Okay,
What information are
Right.
we gathering, collecting? So there is, right, I think define is better than clear.
Okay.
We do
Sure.
track data and some of the information we're given to us today, and then you see the information that you think, oh, what if we also knew this
Exactly.
about the violation,
Yeah,
complaints and the violations.
okay. Great, great,
That's what we're finding, so.
wonderful. Anything else anyone would like to see as a new objective, perhaps? Okay. You feel like we're ready to move on to the next goal area? All right, I think we will let Tricia tackle this.
So throughout this, you will see us switching chairs. We like to switch it up so you guys perk up, you hear different voices, and hopefully we'll keep you awake. So now we have licensing. Again, you see the definition of licensing there. I'll give you a moment to read it. And as long as you feel good with that definition, we can go into looking at the licensing. Again, the summary will be the same for each goal area because the 4 DEI questions apply to all of them. These might be pertinent to licensing, especially the bullet about requirements possibly being a barrier. Might want to create some new objective, like exploring if there are any requirements that need to be looked at or whatnot, or processes that need to be clarified. All right, and we'll look at the current objectives first. And when you look at these objectives, just ask yourself if there are any edits that could possibly be made that would make them possibly more open to encouraging diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, one of the things we don't have on there, but we actually have been working on, talking about removing unnecessary barriers to licensure. And we actually accomplished one goal by removing some requirements from our legal process that had been there for quite a long time. So we did do that. It's not listed as a goal, but we did it.
Okay.
We updated our license renewal to, so that the only requirements were to pay your dues to CME and not to be on the naughty list. And so we had other requirements that were barriers to renewal of licensure that we removed. So we actually accomplished that, but we hadn't written that down. There's another barrier right now that's on our radar to remove other states to become licensed in California. There was, on the regulations, which I was actually not aware of until someone brought it to my attention, you could be practicing for 25 years in another state before certified, but if you haven't taken the exam in 10 years, that you had to take the exam again, and that's like, okay, that's ridiculous. But I didn't even know it was one of our regulations until someone told, actually, maybe several people reached out. Now, certainly my first advice was, well, you should check what a state's rules are before you move here. But I won't deny that I don't think I think the barrier to access, that's not inclusive. I don't think it protects Californians. If somebody in Illinois has been practicing for 25 years and board certified, and this year tell them they have to take the part 1, part 3 again, seems egregious, and I don't think it protects the public. So I think that is an item that the board should work on.
Okay.
To not obstruct applicant licensees coming to California who've been practicing in other states.
Okay. And how would that be accomplished? Would it, you need to
We need to update our regulations.
update regulations? Okay.
I believe is the correct way to fix that.
Okay.
But Kathleen and Brian may know better than I if that's not. I think that's
Okay.
right.
I can add to that. It's a federal movement, and if you're looking into it, other medical boards don't have the responsibility yet. So we are essentially in the same boat along with the other medical boards and the agencies. But this is something that in the federal level is being looked at. Definitely it accomplishes our DEI goals to have reciprocity of licenses and encouraging access to podiatric care for more doctors of podiatric medicine to come into our state and practice those who wish. So it is an issue. Like Madam President said, it's a legislative problem. It's something that is not truly in our control from our board standpoint, but if it's something that you wish us to have for a goal, that would be.
There is a regulation in California about taking the test. We need to remove that.
We need to remove that.
Because it comes back from the day when California used to have its own exam. Back in the 90s, back in my day, I had to take the California exam. This board gave the exam for California DPNs. If this board had its own test. We haven't, so this board has not had its own test in California for 20 years. So that requirement that you take our test is left over from when we had a test. And since we no longer have our own test, that is a moot point that we require we take the test because it doesn't exist anymore. So it's a left, that particular piece in our, that's in our regulation. Not necessarily what's federal, but in California. Historically, because we used to have our own test, we had to take it. So now that we don't, it's a moot point.
What about with other, we're talking about states, but also countries? Is there a barrier for other countries?
Well, the thing that I'm not aware of any podiatric residencies internationally that are accepted in the U.S. at all. Not specific to California. But for example, if you want to practice in the U.S., there might be some Canadian residencies that still have the U.S. residency. Oh yeah, U.S. can go to Canada. Canada will accept our residents, but we don't accept theirs. Yeah.
And we don't accept their We have to ensure safety, we have to make sure that education, experience is there.
And we don't have the resources to go to Canada and evaluate their schools and residencies. So that would be beyond, I think.
There we go, man.
Yeah. Right, we're having Costco pizza, so our trip to Canada, to evaluate their podiatry school is not.
That is a barrier within itself.
Exactly. But I think this one we can do. I think.
Okay.
You bet.
Okay.
It's easy. But I do think that this particular issue in our regulation about the exam that Bill raised is something that we should work on in the next review of our regulations and get that removed. I don't think that protects California because it's in this point we don't have a test anymore.
Okay. Any other ideas for new objectives in the area of licensing?
There's a comment about philosophy, and I didn't understand what that comment was, because they're separate licenses. So I don't know how that would relate to our licensing, or besides they wanted to be included in one B.
I think the person probably didn't understand that it's not in their purview.
Okay, yeah, that's how I understood it, yeah.
Yeah, there were some responses to that survey that came in that was clear that not everybody knows what our purview
What
is
our
and what it's not.
Okay, yeah.
So then somebody went with like Medicare, and I'm like, okay, no, that's not us. So, I mean, certainly we welcome all the stakeholders' responses, but then some of them are not actually our purview.
All right.
That's an issue for outreach.
Yes, yes. Okay.
So no other revisions to the existing ones.
Okay, so just, yep.
And then if the staff can, anything about licensing, that's pretty much that.
Okay. So, in that case, we'll move along to legislation and regulation. Again, we'll start with the statement, give you a moment to read that. And does that look like it defines legislation, regulation?
I do detect and offer access to all consumers. Detect and offer access to all consumers.
All right. What do people think about that addition? Does that look good? You see nodding heads? Okay. All right, so again, this summary is just to jog your memory before we look at the existing objectives. And we've got one.
Suggest maybe advocate for all health plans to offer the same level of access to podiatric care in California.
Okay.
Repeat that.
Sure. Advocate for all health plans to offer the same level of access to podiatric care in California.
And
Maybe instead of saying health plans, be more general, advocate for access. And that could be anything from Medi-Cal to.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I wouldn't say health
All the
plans,
way down.
because that might not seem to our purview if we talk to the health plans, but we did say access.
advocate for some level of
Access,
access.
and that could then be applied to any number of
And legislative, right?
because then it could be PNS, it could be Blue Shield, it could be Medi-Cal, then it gives us a bigger window, I think, but advocating for access to the care provided by PPMs, I think is our goal.
So the phrase "the same level," is that something you want to keep in, or?
How about,
I would say access.
Access,
So
yeah.
Okay.
I would think on the same level.
every access to podiatric care for all Californians?
Okay.
Then having inclusivity, so.
Yep. And I would imagine the why I address it is because currently not everyone's plan or not everyone has access to podiatric care.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that could be for multiple reasons. It could be they're in a rural community, it could have Medi-Cal, it could have a plan that excluded us, discrimination.
Increased
so-
access to care. Yeah. And then, any ideas for how the board could go about encouraging that or just doing that
Well, I
advocacy?
do think that it's our responsibility to continue to monitor.
Okay.
Monitor legislation, that, we can continue on that, or, and advocate, monitor and advocate. Because maybe we'll send a letter of support, or maybe we'll
Okay.
supply someone else with information. oh, you forgot podiatrists, you know. That would, I think that's important for us to keep an eye on about either intentful or unintentional limiting access to podiatric care, either by saying doctors, or like we had a conversation, saying physicians and surgeons, oh, but you meant us too. Yeah. And so make sure we're keeping our eyes peeled, and then when we see those, we take action.
Just as a question to council, is putting the term advocate in the strategic plan forbidden, or sort of, you think, as the planners who are gonna be writing this up, if that's not the role of the board to advocate, I wanna make sure we don't put a word in that's gonna be getting us in trouble later. Support, maybe, or? I know there's.
So like advocate is, I mean, necessarily a legal term of art.
Okay. Okay, great. I just wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
It means that we're not gonna put billboards up, basically, right? I can see what you're saying, right? We're not putting billboards that support this legislation.
Spend board funds on a publicity campaign, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Another thing that Dr. Lee mentioned that the board might want to consider, that Dr. Nancy kind of brought up, and, there is a federal Federation of Podiatric Medical Boards, and I think it should be one of the goals of this board to participate, interacts with the Federation of Podiatric Medical Boards. I think that should be one of the roles of this board, like, hey, we know it exists and we should participate. For example, they might be talking about a Model Practice Act, well, we should be part of that conversation. Right? So those certain issues, so I think the one of the things this board should do is, under legislation, participate in, with the Federation, yeah.
We haven't been historically very involved with the Federation.
And then Judy was president of it, well, she was president of us, so then we're like, great, you got it. But I think that should be an ongoing goal of of participation, either one person assigned to a liaison, or everybody's reading emails, whatever that might be. But I think that we should continue to, and I know Brian talks with the Federation, but I think that should be in words that we do that. Because then we know what other people, other podiatrists in other states, what their issues are, what our issues are.
Okay.
Maybe, and be inclusive and participate at the national level, I think.
Okay.
Is important. So that's only one of the things that we do, but if they were done doing it, we do it.
To be inclusive and participate. Yeah.
Yes, it's important to be a part of the federation, but also to look at it as a consumer. Not the doctor, but what the consumer is.
Pardon me? I think your microphone.
Am I that low?
Does that make sense? Again, just, it's important to, again, interact with especially medical doctors and understanding that world. But we are, again, our goal is for the consumer. And as long as we're looking at it through that lens, and again, making sure that when we come back, it is about protecting the consumer.
And then how would the board get more involved with the Federation of Podiatric Medical Boards? What would be a way to do that?
There's conference calls, there's Zoom meetings, there's emails to be read.
Okay.
You can receive information from them.
Mm-hmm.
You can go to their website, you can participate.
Okay.
As board members, we're all invited to participate with the Federation's meetings. Any of us can attend, when registered to attend, any of us can participate.
Okay, great.
Don't want to really, literally go for can we prop it at the edge of the table and that may maybe
Yeah, that might
the
help. I
great
think it's
table?
better if they just pass it.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Central location and just pass it around.
Okay.
The people on might probably have a hard time hearing.
I was wondering about that too.
Okay.
It would not require it, but as I mentioned, we had a previous board member who was a board member of the Federation Board, so that's another opportunity to, I wouldn't say require that one of us do it, but certainly we encourage.
encourage.
Yeah, encourage, that as a board, we should encourage participation, and if one of us wanted to do it, be supportive of that.
All right. So you have two new goals for this legislation and regulation goal area. Did anyone have any other objectives they'd like to add? Okay, and staff, any burning objectives you'd like to add to legislation and regulation, or you good? Okay. So we'll do another changing of the guard.
All right. So our next goal area is administration. So does this description pretty much encapsulate what you were thinking it would? Okay, see some nods. All right, and then again, some of these things might contribute or fall in the area of things like reporting feedback or newsletter, any of that. So in administration, currently you have 3 objectives. Oh my goodness. And we,
Add diversity to succession planning. And again, not in a different way of thinking of diversity, it's just making sure that we have the representation of practicing physicians on the board and community members.
okay. So how would you phrase maybe, I mean, I believe the makeup of the board is encapsulated in the act. Am I right, Brian? Yeah, so there's,
The board doesn't have a say on who gets on the board, that's in his office.
It is a good point, but I don't know how to add that as a word.
Or it's not really, or an action item, it's not an action item for us.
Yeah, you're right, because we can't control that.
right.
Well, I think that's more in the office like Brian.
Yeah.
Encouraging, again, diversity training, but that would be required to the state.
Okay, yeah, can't we, that's one
Okay.
thing back to the government.
Did you want to include something about promoting diversity training among staff and,
So is it a requirement for the state employees or?
It already is, right?
I know DCA has a policy, I honestly am not sure. But,
Most of us have to do it 3 times.
Yeah,
so.
exactly.
okay.
But
And
we're-
staff, staff members, have you had the DEI training? You have? Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Good. Okay, all right, good.
But that's a good answer though, so that we can say
That's certainly an idea, yeah. So you want to say promote, provide, conduct trainings?
Yes, all of the above. I let the staff has done it and been doing it.
Well, I don't know that we would, that we would provide the training, that we're
Oh, right.
encouraging our senior members to,
Take advantage of it.
take advantage of it.
Right,
So I
okay.
don't know that we would create, content, because I think we would like to,
Yeah, so promote should be, yeah.
By just saying his name first.
And you want, do you want to specify DEI training? It sounded like that might be where you're going.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Why?
That goes back to your mission statement, right? It's so, so that you can ensure that all staff think about these,
Right.
three elements and then the decisions they make.
Wonderful. And then the desired outcome would be enlightened staff. I'm not sure if that's quantifiable. DI oriented, yeah, focused.
and so that would be both, both the staff of the board and the, public that comes interact with, all feel more seen and heard.
Right.
A more inclusive environment, both for the staff working here and for the public who comes in contact with us.
Nice. And so that seems pretty straightforward to,
Continue, with DCA, activities.
It is also ongoing, so
Yes.
it's acknowledged that it's been
Right.
ongoing.
right. Beautiful. I did want to offer a suggestion if you're open, or you feel like you've got everything that you needed added in here. 4.2, you might want to talk about promoting a diverse set of applicants. I don't know how much control you have over who applies to be a board member, but I don't know if you have any outreach efforts already going to.
That's kind of what
It is, okay. Fair enough.
But the nature of the profession is diverse, so I think.
Just out of curiosity, how many people in this group right here are non-union? So there's 3 out of 2. So we know Sandy is. So we have a pretty
Right.
diverse group.
Yeah.
English, Spanish,
Portuguese,
Portuguese.
Italian, Korean,
All right.
some Russian.
Man, knocking it out of the park. You're a ringer.
We're gonna go on a world trip.
We're focused on California right now, right?
Yeah, we don't need Klingon, but. All right, so it seems like maybe that's a good set for one addition in administration, no revisions. All right, you want to hop up again? Do our dance?
Right. All right, you're on the home stretch, the final goal area, number 5, education and communication. Again, the statement defining it is underneath it there. I'll give you a moment to review that. And do you feel that adequately defines the goal area? Think so? Okay.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the financial impact, someone mentioned about reaching out to students, explaining what the board does, if we had the money, if we don't. But, I think it'd be great if one someday if they want. There are two colleges of podiatric medicine going once a year and letting them know like what the board is and what it doesn't. You have to have a license to practice, because when you're in school, you're just thinking about passing your exams, you don't, and then you do a residency. The licensing is kind of further down the road that you might not quite understand how that works. And I would think that a board representative to the schools to meet the students and explain to them what the licensing board is and what the requirements are. And when you grow up, you have to do these things as well. We don't have time for that right now, but I do think that interacting, because we have too many residencies in California, I think that would be even more cost prohibitive, but since we have two schools. Now, it's true, not every graduate of a school is going to stay in California. However, no matter where you go, you'll have to be licensed. So I see, even if it's just, some of it will be California specific, but I still think we carry that knowledge forward no matter what state you end up in. So if we
I
have,
was thinking there may be this large conference in California every year in June, for which some of us could do double duty, and at least have them open, a small little piece to kind of reach out to students and residents at that time, for probably no cost. I know a guy.
yeah. So,
It's hard to have all the students show up every day. That's the cap. It is, but also too, some of us also are invited to the schools under a different duty, and maybe we could ask for personal privileges, strictly discuss the board. We used to have that, I think, maybe, am I dating myself, 10, 15 years? We used to have either meetings at the college, or we used to have Q&A sessions. I personally will have to take Carolyn or both for a different half bedtime. But I think it's a definitely valid point, not only as an outreach, they are the future of podiatric medicine and practice in California. I think it has to go as some kind of item, right? So I totally agree with you, both of you. We do also in California have two podiatrists that are huge on Instagram, and one is huge on TikTok that we reach out to doing a type of
PSA kind of thing.
PSA type of thing.
Yeah, it was pretty empty.
Or like a June meeting or something like that.
I think we had better luck even meeting at Kaiser where we had some.
Yeah, I think that outreach, there's sort of three buckets. There's the student that's thinking about going to podiatry, there's the podiatry student, and there's the resident, right? And I think what we're seeing though is that the class sizes are getting smaller, and therefore we're gonna have a lot of residencies that go unmatched coming up the next few years. So how do we promote California residencies through the board? Is it a way to say, look at the scope that we have, it's different than other states. We have our own board, we really want to practice in the state. Those would be the things that I would think about, how do you get individuals to come to the state. You're more likely to stay in California if you do residency in California, I think that tends to be, right? So if we get them to stay in California, because I think working on the class sizes are really small.
Okay, so the way I address it here would be the class sizes are growing smaller.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna have 600 students graduating, there's 800 residencies, so, 200 programs are gonna eventually
Yeah.
close.
And for the board, fiscally,
Yeah.
fewer licensees means our licensing,
Your
fewer
funds-
licensees means our dues are only gonna go
Right.
up.
Right.
And so that's.
So we have 100, I think, residency licenses a year. Is that about right? Yeah. So, I mean, it makes up 10%,
Mhm.
or 5% still.
I put less taxes in and less funds.
Less access?
Yeah, because if you're graduating less residents, you have
Less
less
doctors
access
to
to
provide care.
the care.
Okay.
So if the
Um.
podiatrist per 100,000 from us,
Yeah.
because there's not as many of us to see.
They did mention that fewer licensees meant a higher, like, having to raise the license cost, right?
That's what I was kind of thinking.
So maybe where it says fewer licensees equals, we need to raise the license fee,
Both things. So there'll be less access and the license will cost more. So
Right.
there's fewer of us.
which is, could be a barrier to licensure, right?
And a barrier to access, right?
Yes,
That's
for
really
sure.
the ultimate thing, so that the consumer won't have access.
And then desired outcome, I would think, would be just more people follow or choosing to follow that the profession. And then how can the board address it? Any ideas about how to promote?
I would say, PSA.
Like when you put the issue, like we were saying before, that actually could be, that go there. Forward to go there.
Okay. So they're saying number 4 could actually be how number 5 is achieved. So you can just cut that and paste it, and yeah. Since they already have a following, just have them join the cause. Okay. And I know Anne was furiously typing as you were spouting out IDs. Oops, sorry, Alex. So the first one there, explore outreach to the 2 podiatry schools.
And I again think that that's the last column.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, they should all be exactly.
And
Okay.
it could be the number 4 where we're.
Add it to 4.
Add it to 4?
Oh,
Yeah, and I think all of them.
All
Actually,
of
the
them.
next one should be added to 4 as well.
Okay.
I think we were coming up of how we could do it before we wrote the
Yeah.
line.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's
We work
fine.
backwards.
That's fine. When you're brainstorming, you're just
Yeah.
throwing it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, all of these.
Yeah, all of those would be
Okay.
things that we could do. Yeah.
And is the main goal still just to promote residencies, or has it
I would
gotten a
say
little larger
promote-
now?
California license.
Yes, we promote California as a place to practice podiatric medicine.
Okay. So any other objectives you'd like to add to education and communication?
I have another question for the doctor. So, for the diversity inclusion training, is that something that's being offered to private, like Korea continuing education, or is this out of my league?
No, so those of us, if we're in a small private practice, we may not have access to it, but the 4 of us here, belong to either a large private practice or a Kaiser. So we have, due to the sizes of our organizations where we work, we, have to do DEI training. And then in addition, we also have, in this role, we also have to do it for the state of California. So we're already, and then I'm a delegate to the American Podiatric Medical Association, and I have to do it there too. Not that that's a bad thing, but whatever you have, so.
And even in that same conference we were talking about in June, every year we have at least one lecture that
But right now in California, I think your second part of your question, that's not required for licensure. To continue the training, but it is part of many of the things that we participate in. It's in our conferences, our employers, so we are doing those things at that level. But right now, to get your medical license in California, that's not required. But for example, if I'm a staff at a hospital, biases in medicine it's not quite the same as DEI, but it's, in the ballpark.
Yes.
So, you know, studies about medical providers having bias in providing care, like who we prescribe pain medications to. You know, or some people get pain medications faster at an emergency room. Some people go home with prescriptions, or other groups of people not. For example, biases in healthcare. So that's also part of our. Many of us have done those seminars as well about bias in healthcare to make sure that we're treating patients, being aware of cultural differences and of our own intrinsic biases about how we practice. And it's also part of, again, not required for licensure, but many of us, because of the organizations we work in, are also getting that training as well.
All right, thank you. So, any other, and you've added one, and you can also edit existing objectives if you feel they could somehow include diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for the 5.2, something you could do is something about accessibility of information. So exchange helpfulness with accessibility of information. And so that would give you room to work on clear language, maybe plain language. That's a big push right now, is to use plain language. So that's just a thought for 5.2.
And it's great adding accessibility.
Okay.
Like you said, that covers a lot of different types of barriers.
Okay.
Do you want to take out helpfulness or just add accessibility at the end?
I think adding accessibility, because helpfulness can be like relevant, you know,
Right.
relevant.
Okay.
That you got, what you were looking for, when you got there, you found it. So I still think helpfulness is still appropriate. We have on the website what people are going there for, so we have stuff there, but not what they wanted. I think that's good. That's added.
Might make it green so you don't forget. All right, and one last call for any new objectives. And staff, feel free to jump in if you have any thoughts on adding any new objectives for education and communication. Okay. All right, and that's perfectly fine. Sorry. 3 there. And 3 here. Oh, forgive me. Yes, 7.
Nice. So,
Sure. All right, so your current plan is from 2023 to 2027, so you still have a chunk of time, but would you like to extend it further now that you're adding 7 new objectives? Or do you feel like you still have adequate time for those 7?
Got 2 more years on it now. I won't be here, but on behalf of the rest of the board, I think we just got 2 more years.
I would say at least 2 more years.
2? Okay.
What's our range?
Right now, we did
27.
23, 27.
Not the election range. What are our choices for range?
So typically, typically a strategic plan is between 2 to 5 years in length. And the reasoning behind that is that you don't, yeah, but the reasoning behind that is that,
He's like, when to see that?
We'll all be retired by then.
yeah. But the reasoning is within that time frame, you don't want it to be too long, because a strategic plan is based on the priorities that your stakeholders pointed out, and those priorities might be stale after a certain length of time. After so many years pass, those may not be the priorities that you need to be addressing anymore. So that's the reasoning behind that. So
That's a good reason. I think, kidding, not kidding, I think that this amount of work that we just did now, that with 7 new objectives in the conversation, that I think we have earned extending it, past
No.
So when would we, I guess that's the question, since we're looking at this plan that's ending in 27, when would the next time be that we would review this?
When your plan's coming to an end, so.
Okay.
The
So it's
reason
up-
why we
yeah.
did the supplemental ones, because the governor's mandate
Y-
is to do that.
Yes.
Oh, okay, so added it to what we already have.
Mhm.
Okay.
So this was an addendum to that
To
one.
that one,
Right,
okay.
not a, because when you do it brand new from scratch,
Yeah.
you're surveying stakeholders
Yeah.
and getting all that data. So this was
Okay.
for the 2023 plan, this was just an
And,
addendum.
okay.
But,
That makes
but we did a lot of, I would have to say, for an addendum, I think we did a lot of work. But I do say, right, as I do see so myself, and maybe because we weren't in person, when we did this, previously we were on the pandemic time, and we did this over the phone, which I think is because, there's disadvantages of that, right? We're here sitting together, we're bouncing ideas off of each other, it's more productive than we were on the phones, in offices. So I think that this was valuable, but, we wouldn't normally do it every 5 years, but I'm thinking what we did today, that should push us,
Yeah, I agree.
push us out a little bit.
Yeah,
right,
yeah, I agree.
From the 2027, is my opinion.
So adding 2 years would mean 29?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, great. And to be fair, staff didn't have the bandwidth at the time to do the action planning from the original plan. So when we contact Brian to do action planning for this one, we'll get a bigger, chunk of work assigned, but we'll also have a tracker. So every year at board meetings, or possibly every board meeting, you'll get an update on how things are going with charts, and it'll be, you'll be able to track things more easily. But, so yeah, we'll move this to make through 29. Great.
And then, so we'll be drafting a strategic plan. So what we did today is not the final thing. We'll be writing up a draft, and then you'll be able to see and suggest edits. That draft goes through several peer reviews. So don't be surprised if it takes us a while. It's not that we type slowly. It's that it goes through several levels of peer review with feedback even from exec. So that's what that's all about. And then after a final plan is approved by the board, then we can look at action planning, which is just with staff, where we break each objective down into tasks necessary to achieve that objective. We assign those tasks to people and with target dates, and then an overall success measure, which is how will the board know they have achieved that objective. And with that, we thank you for your time and participation.
Well done.
Good job.
Shall we go to break while we?
Well, I think, I can just adjourn the
Yeah,
meeting,
no,
because
yeah.
we cleared everything else out before
Okay,
doing this.
We have no
Yeah, we
members
just
of the
like to
public here.
grab the microphone.
Oh, do you want to just use the mic?
What was I gonna say? Get the microphone.
I need the mic.
Thank you, everyone, for attending this meeting of the Podiatric Medical Board, including our facilitators from Solid. Thank you very much for keeping us on track and organized. I'm actually, this was even more than I had envisioned for how much value we were going to get from having you here and update. I wasn't aware of how much that we were actually going to take our strategic plan and add the items to it. So I actually think that we got even more value than I had thought of, and I'm grateful for it, because I think that was very valuable, and I think we got a lot out of it, even more than I had anticipated, which is always a nice surprise. Thank you, everyone, and Daniel will get us the next dates about when we get together. The sunset will be going out before the end of the year, and so Brian will just communicate with us any clarifying items that he had to put in, because we've already voted to approve that. So I think we've had a very successful, productive year, taking care of the citizens of California as respect to the licensees of podiatric medicine. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.